I spoke yesterday briefly of the discovery, the recognition by the priestly observers of the skies in Mesopotamia, the observation that the planets move in a mathematically determinable motion and pace through the zodiac signs, the fixed stars of the heavens. And this recognition of a mathematically determinable inevitability and process brought about the idea of an impersonal force. Now, this is the fundamental thing in the whole of the Orient to this day. An impersonal force underlying the whole phenomenology of the universe. It is noted that this impersonal force carries us through a day of a certain length, light and darkness. This is the solar cycle. A month of a certain length of lunar light and darkness, which is again mathematically predictable. A year of a certain length of light and darkness. And this led to the intuition of a still larger cycle, which we call the eon, of the cosmic coming into being and going out of being. According to this view, there was never a beginning. There is a beginning only of each cycle, which then dissolves into abyssal waters, and out of which then there comes the next cycle, just as day comes after day after day. This cycling, this cyclic concept of time had no beginning and will have no end. There was no creator. There is no creator God. Furthermore, there is no God in our sense of an ultimate personage. Now, human beings, in order to think, have to think in terms of certain categories. And one of the most popular categories is anthropomorphic personification. So that people normally think of a god, of a presence. And we do have hundreds of images of Indian gods. But these gods do not stand as a final term. They are simply accommodations to human thought which point past themselves to an utterly transcendent, unnameable, undefinable, inconceivable mystic mystery. That's the ultimate point in these Oriental traditions, as it was also in the Mesopotamian. This terrific, impersonal, you can't pray to the sun to stop. It won't. You can't pray to the cosmic order to change. It won't. There is consequently an attitude of absolute acquiescence in what is taking place. And the aim of the religious disciplines is to make the individual acquiesce. Now, with respect to the nature of this ultimate, there is no nature to it. It is beyond description, beyond names, beyond all categories. And when you realize that the categories of being and not being are categories, you realize that you can't say it either is or is not. When you realize that the terms many and one are categories, it neither is one nor is it many. You just can't talk about it. Now, to ask as we do, is the divine power loving, wrathful, pleased with me, preferring this group to that group? This, from this standpoint, is anthropomorphization of a mystery that transcends human concepts. This isn't loving, it isn't wrathful, it isn't any of this. And so what we're doing, from the Orient standpoint, in projecting these questions and relating ourselves to them, is simply anthropomorphically misinterpreting, and by that short-circuiting the whole mystery. It is therefore absolutely transcendent of definitions. Now, this word transcendent in theological discourse has two quite different senses. When we speak of God as being transcendent, we mean that that personage, which we name God, is outside of the universe. It transcends the universe. It's a kind of spatial transcendence. Whereas, as I'm using it, and as it refers to Oriental thinking, what is meant is all categories are transcended, even that of being outside or inside. Now the next point is that that mystery which transcends all conceptualization is the mystery of our own being. We are part and parcel of the universe itself, and the mystery of the universe is the mystery of ourselves. So that while it is transcendent, it is also, in a very deep and fundamental sense, imminent. That which is transcendent, in the sense in which I'm speaking, is also imminent in the same sense. And so we come to that key formula from the Chandogya Upanishad of about the 7th or 8th centuries BC, Tat Tvam Asi, you are it. That mystery which you seek to know, which you look for outside, which you project into personifications, is your own very being. And looking for it out there, you are losing it, because you are committing yourself to a notion of relationship, of dualities, of entities, which absolutely obscures the mystery. The fundamental aim, therefore, of all of the Oriental aspects of culture, insofar as they are traditional, whether it is philosophy, art, sociology, law, anything, is to bring you to an actual realization in experience of your identity with that mystery. And I call this mythic identification. The aim of all these systems is to bring about not simply the concept, which I'm sure we're all able to grasp, but the experience, which is something quite different again, as the root of one's life, of identity with that which is no that. This is what's meant by the fundamental Buddhist concept, anatman. There is no self. That thing which you are protecting as yourself is no thing. So if we were to be rendering this algebraically in algebraic terms, we could write A equals X. A, you, or anything else at all, are exactly that mystery. However, not the you that you think of as you. Not that entity born in time, with a certain complexion, with a certain set of friends, with a certain identity, as we're saying now, peculiar to itself. That is not X. And so we come to this curious oxymoron, this curious absurdity, this curious self-contradictory statement. A does equal X. The A that you think yourself to be is not it. I'm not my body. I know my body. I'm the knower of the body. I'm pure consciousness. I'm not my thoughts, my feelings. You can drive yourself out the back of the wall this way. You are not anything of yourself that you think of as yourself. And that which transcends all this thinking is exactly the you that is the basic you, which is identical with all things, and yet the concept identical can't rest with that. Now when you compare this with our Occidental forms, we come to a very interesting contrast. The religions of the West, as they now stand, are all derived from the Levant. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are sister religions. They are all rooted in the thought that has come to us through the Old Testament. The Old Testament is grounded in earlier Levantine traditions, most importantly the Sumero-Babylonian complex. In these, the idea of distinction between man and God is fundamental. God is the creator, Man and the world are the created, and creator and creature are not identical. In fact, what one finds when one reviews the Western religious traditions is that the realization or belief, I am that, is the prime heresy. It is for that people are crucified and burned. When Christ said, I and the Father are one, that was blasphemy, and according to the texts as we receive them, it was for that he was condemned to crucifixion. 900 years later, the great Sufi mystic Hallaj said exactly the same thing and received exactly the same punishment. He too was crucified. Well, now let us consider this. Since creator and creature are not the same, and since the experience of identity is the prime heresy, in the religions derived from the Levant, all that can be done in this context of quest is to render and experience a relationship to the divine. So that in algebraic terms one would write A R X. A is related to X. How do we become related to the X in these traditions? Now remember, it was in the Levant that the earliest great high civilization forms developed. Very important in these was the society. The way we become related to God is through participation in and identification with His holy society. In every one of these cases, the peculiar local society regards itself as in a very special way divinely endowed. The God, since He is personified, who is the creator of the world, has also committed a certain group of people to His service, and this distinguishes them from every other group, and no other group is in relationship to the divine. This underlies every one of these traditions. God has a covenant with a certain people. No other people participates in this. How does one participate in the covenant? By being born a member of that group, and then participating in the covenant, honoring it, observing its laws. And these laws were delivered specifically to a certain man in a certain place at a certain time, and no one else has them. In the Christian tradition, Christ is true God and true man. This Christians regard as a mystery. In the Orient, as I've shown, everybody can say this of himself. The aim is to be able to say that of yourself, or I can say it of any of these bits of paraphernalia in the room here. This is it. That divine mystery which lives in all things is the base of this chair that I'm looking at. You can take anything, a stick, a stone, a dog, a cat, draw a ring around it, put it there, cut it off from all your knowledges of relationship. What is it? Anything can become the focal point of a meditation on the mystery dimension. The whole universe is a revelation, thus, not of God, but of that divine mystery which transcends conceptualization as God. And it's everywhere in all things. In these other traditions, on the other hand, we have a special revelation, not a universal revelation. The universe reveals to those who know this God the marvels of that God's works. It's a totally different kind of universal revelation. When we speak of God being everywhere, this is not the same as saying that God is all things. In the Christian tradition, one speaks of man being made in the image of God. In the Oriental tradition, you are a manifestation of the very energy of God, and that energy is you, not God. God Himself is a manifestation of that. Christ is true God and true man. Through our humanity, we are related to Christ. Through His Godhood, He relates us to God. But how do we get related to Christ? Through membership in His church. the unbaptized are out.
Here we are live. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Glad that you're here. Thank you for coming. Today's a big day. We're going to be covering a lot today, and there's a lot to talk about. It's been a heck of a week, has it not? I'm not real crazy about making announcements, so I'm going to make them up front. This is where I'm going to be live in 1 week. In 1 week from right now, we will be together. Those who can make it, I'm going to be in Eatonville, Washington. We're meeting at the Millhouse Cider Company, and it is truly just going to be a time of getting together and hanging out and talking life and great awakening and all that good stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. I can't wait to see you. My wife is going to be there, which is great, and we're happy to meet up with y'all. So hopefully you can make it. Okay, so this has been a heck of a week. I need to kind of give a little prelude before we get going here and explain how all this came about. So it was on Wednesday. I had already gotten into this mythological Tack talk, and I already have a number of slides, and we'll be getting into those, but I got to cover this first. But on Wednesday evening, Ethical Skeptic released a post, and this is the front end of it here. Sorry, I'm on the wrong thing. Add the stage, go. Okay, next. Here, let me go a little bigger with it. Okay, there's the address. If you want to go check it out, there's the address. And the reason why this caught my attention was because it proposed a very interesting concept. And that was that the Earth is actually a three-pole planet. There are three rotating poles, or I should say rotating centers of the Earth because of its shape. Now we're gonna get into this here in a sec, but his theory, this gentleman, or I don't know who wrote it, a lady or a gentleman, but this gentleman's theory was that there was a deluge that happened about every 12,000 years. And I didn't realize the implications of what he was saying until I got a note from somebody, and I'll get to that in a minute. But he proposed this idea that there is an effect, and it's this effect here. Have it on video for you right here. Okay. And this effect is a flipping effect that occurs due to electromagnetics as well as an off-center rotating point. And it's off-center in the sense of how it appears. Here's another shot here. This. And it's, as you can see, there's a rotating object, but every in a succinct way, every few seconds, it's flipping on its axis and it's rotating in an entirely different way in an opposite direction. It's a really amazing phenomena. Okay, now it's easy to see this right now, as you can see in just one rotation, which would be 1 day in Earth time, it makes the rotation. Now, if you look at the Earth, let's go here, not that. Okay. Now, here's the Earth. Now, I understand that this is just an image that's been created with a computer, okay? And I'm not saying that it's fully accurate. I'm not saying that it's, everything that we should know. I'm giving it as a representation to help give some gravity and credence to what this man is claiming and where this goes, because I really got caught up in it initially. I think I over-promoted it because I was really thinking that this was the thing, but there is a major, major flaw in the research, which is unbelievable, because if you read the paper, it is highly scientific and it uses a language that basically you need a college degree in geophysics to understand. And so when I saw this, it caught me, and I spent days researching this, going back and back over and over again, taking phrases from the actual write-up, applying those into Grok, getting Grok's opinion of it, then taking words and phrases from that, refining in the very typical way that I go about researching this stuff. Okay, so in order to understand what they're claiming, we're just going to do really quickly, we're going to walk through how a planet forms. We're going to go through some of that stuff right now, some of that science, because that has bearing on this whole thing. You need to understand the basic fundamentals of planetary development to gather what he's claiming. All right. So for those that don't know, and it's okay if you don't know, it's fine. There's no judgment here. But for those of you that don't know, there's a very orderly way that planets Star system galaxies form, and it's all based in sacred geometry. So it's all perfect. It all forms through rotations and spirals, and there's no mistakes. Okay. If you want to find a mistake in nature, I welcome you to go and try and find it. But as far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing. Okay. So everything has meaning, purpose, unity. All right. So to begin looking at the science, supernova are stars collapsing. They form black holes and neutron stars with molecular clouds of gas filled with basic elements surrounding them. Okay. So looking at this top left, molecular clouds inside eventually collapse into stars, a sphere of burning gas. The star then forms an accretion disk. I have the Sombrero galaxy here for you to see that. That's that flat section that you see. This is electromagnetics and gravity at work. That's that flat section you see. That's the same type of ring effect that you see on Saturn, because Saturn is following the same pattern. It's sacred geometry. It's following the same pattern as how the galaxy forms. Okay, and all these things follow patterns. Okay, and those patterns will have similar characteristics because nature loves novelty and developing these things repeatedly. And so sometimes within this whole situation, there are anomalies. And there's no doubt that this man is claiming that the Earth is an enormous anomaly in the usual. And one of the concerns I had was that he didn't really give any reason why it's that way. He just said it is. And I'll show you the pictures. But just so that you know, as what you're seeing is, okay, that dust is the dust that's coming out of the supernova, which is basically ground up planets, universe, space dust, all that stuff that you see coming out of the top of black holes in certain visual representations, infrared, X-ray, things like that. And you can see ejecta coming out of the center of the black hole. And what is happening is all of that dust is accreting and it's going into a spiral. And that spiral is going to become eventually a star. This is how it happens. And what is accreting is gas, helium, oxygen, super, the smallest molecules, the smallest that we've been able to find here, are prevailing in the universe. And as this center, all this dust begins to accrete, it begins to form a center to the galaxy, to what it's accreting. And so everything falls into this flat plane as it is moving towards the center of this accreting star that's gathering more and more matter. It's gathering it from other stars from around it, and it's gathering, it's pulling these things towards itself. And as things compress, just so you know physics, as you compress air, it heats. It gets hotter and hotter as you compress it. You're going to need to remember this later. And then it gets cooler and cooler as you decompress. This is the basics of an air conditioner, how it works through compression. That's why an air conditioner has a compressor. Okay. So as you release the air, it cools down, but as it's going in towards this star, towards this star that's generating, it's compounding these elements, it's compounding these molecules, pressing them tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter together until eventually enough friction and pressure forms for that star to begin to form ejecta that come out of it. And this is just the content of the star, the plasma that is throwing off ejecta. And you can see those in the CMEs when they show that for our sun here. You can see ejecta. And the sun is constantly emitting that, and that creates what's called the Oort cloud. And that's this. Okay. So ejecta from the star and particles from the original molecular cloud form into planets. So what is happening is the accretion disk shrinks, and then you have an accumulation of matter. And these things begin to run into each other. And when it's at the beginning here, it's very hot. So there's everything is molten. It's very warm, and it is coming out. Think of it as birthing. It's coming out of this superheated space, and that superheated space is emanating out, and it's throwing projecta, dust, all kinds of stuff into the space. And that forms that cloud you see right there. That's the Oort cloud. And this is what creates the vacuum that is space. But this area, the interstellar winds, is a different composition than the solar winds that we're getting from our sun. And this is critical to understanding why you're a carbon creature and why our Earth is carbon-based. coming out of our sun just based on what it picked up from out and about around it. It's then throwing that out into this accretion plane, and it's protons, as I look right here. It's protons, electrons, alpha particles, carbon, nitrogen. This is the characteristic. This is the just like you have characteristics, our sun has characteristics. And carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, neon, magnesium, silicon, and iron are the major components. There's more of those than everything else, these ones I've listed. And those compose the solar wind. Okay? And that forms the Oort cloud. Now, all of this is coming about through sacred geometry. Nothing is outside of sacred geometry. Nothing is outside of the sacredness and perfection that is the universe. And it self-complexifies. Do you notice? This process I'm showing you here is self-complexifying. You have a cloud, a random chaos. From chaos comes order. And this cloud, as it densifies in its randomness, it self-organizes in the same way that you self-organized from conception. And the process just carries out. This is the magnificence. This is the magic. This is the mystery that underlies. Why does it form in this sacred geometry? Why does it always do this? Okay, and it's a process of electromagnetics. Those are the self-organizing function. Gravity, it's a form of self-organizing. And it uses these properties in the universe to build upon itself, just like you build a wall, just like you build a swimming pool. There's a process. And as you follow that process, stuff gets built. Okay, your creative faculty works the same way. You'll be involved in something, different ideas will be coming at you, and all of that stuff, like a molecular cloud of ideas in your head, begins to compress, and eventually, bam, you get this revelation of this idea of something. And you, from nothing came something. Okay, and it's this magical aspect that permeates all of the universe. Okay, now this is exactly the way our earth formed. Now, if you want to go with the whole creation idea and that there's a God that specifically made every single planet and specifically made every single star and specifically went around in this very personified way and created everything, that's fine. I'm not going to shoot you down for that. I'm just explaining here the real scientific credence that backs up what we are actually observing without having to get into any kind of spiritual hocus pocus or imagination. I am showing you the ground level science of what we are seeing actually in the universe taking place. So this isn't a theory I'm throwing at you. This isn't craziness idea that I'm throwing at you. This is understood, well understood science. Okay. Now, notice here on the bottom left how all the planet orbits form in the same accretion disk shape that started with our sun. And you say to yourself, why did that happen? The reason why that happened is because that's where all the matter is on the accretion disk, and that's where all the collisions begin to happen as all this matter chunctifies, you could say. And it gets bigger and bigger chunks. And the reason why, and I'll talk about Pluto in a minute, but the reason why there are gas giants past Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, those are gas giants, and they have the same exact idea that made the sun, but they're not big enough. There wasn't enough mass for them to keep growing and growing and growing. They began to form their own, like Saturn, accretion disk and mass. Okay? And it's just gases that are compressing rather than actual matter, like we saw here. The iron, the silicon, the magnesium, you see, that is more of the compositions of the planets of Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Mars has a lot of iron. That's why it's red. Okay. Your blood has a lot of iron. That's why it's red. Okay. That's why some alien creatures, if you subscribe to alien beings, have blue blood because their blood is copper based, because they come from a solar system, a galaxy that is copper in its sense. And in the same way a person has a personality, they just have a sense about them. You could take two people, let's say both males, they'll be totally different, even though they're both males. They look similar. They're built similarly. They look, all that, but they have their own unique characteristics. Because remember, nature loves patterns. And so our galaxy is the same idea as your personality. And its personality is composed of magnesium, silicon, iron, nitrogen, carbon, and so forth. That's why, in case you ever wondered, why is it like this? That's why. That's why everything is carbon-based, filled with iron, full of magnesium. That's why magnesium is at the center of your health, because it's a critical factor in what built you, the molecules that built you. Do you see? Okay, so as the planets form on this accretion disk, you notice that there's one, Pluto, that's way on the outside. Now, why, you ask yourself, why is Pluto not on the accretion disk, Chuck, if the accretion disk forms from sacred geometry? And Pluto obviously has not followed the sacred geometry. So what's going on? Okay, there's called randomness. There's called crazy actions that happen in the universe. And most likely what happened was Pluto was either a ice block or chunk on another system that blew up from a supernova and got caught up in our orbit, or it formed from the ice chunks on the outside of some other galaxy and got too close to ours and it came into our orbit. The point I'm trying to make is Pluto is an orphan, most likely. It's an orphan. How beautiful is that? Pluto is most likely an orphan, and that's why it's on this odd plane. That's why some comets are like that. They're on these weird, like Halley's Comet it's on this weird rotation, and it's because this, as you can see here, this Oort cloud, that contains gravity from the sun. And so if a planet, if an object or something gets caught up and passes through into our Oort cloud, there's a sucking effect that happens. And this is why Jupiter protects us, because Jupiter is a gas giant that sucks comets and all kinds of stuff that would normally stay rotating around the system in orbit. Jupiter has such a strong gravity that it pulls that kind of stuff towards it. Okay, this is all just the basic science that comprises our galaxy. Now, when the Earth formed, the reason why all the planets you see are round, like perfectly spherical, is because they're molten as they're forming. So as from the supernova, so as its ejecta chunks are coming out from the sun, or were there when the sun exploded, or there when the star formed, sorry, those chunks are rotating and they're smashing against each other on this accretion disk. And it keeps happening. And this happens over billions of years. And eventually, any planet begins to form. And it gets thicker and denser, it gets more energy, more gravity, more electromagnetics, and it begins to pull. And this is what happened in the beginning with the Earth. Why is the moon covered in all kinds of pot marks and everything? That's because in the beginning, when all this stuff was going on, bombardment and comets were commonplace. That's why there's no life happening at that time, because there's a cataclysm happening very often when all of this stuff is first forming, and it takes time for things to settle down, for the planets to form and grab all that extra stuff. And then finally you have some steadiness. Okay. Right about that time, there was an event that happened to the Earth. Okay. It was the Theia impact, and it was a planet, a smaller planet than Earth is the theory. Okay, I'm not saying this is 100% right. I'm not saying that this is it. You have to believe it, and if you don't, you're a fool. I'm not saying that. I'm giving you the basic thermodynamics, geodynamics necessary to have what we have here. There is a sense to it. There is reason to it. It's not just like, well, magically one day there was a moon, and magically one day there was an Earth. It doesn't have to be like that. There's actually a science behind it. And so this planet hit Earth. And you need to understand all of these things are almost molten. They're just beginning to harden. And the reason why they're forming into spheres and not oblong stuff like you see in comets is because thermal expansion from heat. Okay, so what happens when you have a gel state, and you have this super strong magnetic pull at the center of the gel state? The gel is going to form a ball. Everything's going to form into a ball because that's the tightest structure available for something that's pulling in. This is what people need to understand about gravity and who buy into things like flat Earth. Everything is pulling in. The Earth things are not pulling down and things will fall off the Earth. That's not, you're not seeing the larger picture. The Earth has its own gravitational pull, and it pulls things inward. And so the most organized, perfect structure that will fit into that magnetic grab is a circle, a sphere. Okay? And so that's why planets are round. Because when they form into the shell that hardens and becomes the planet itself, it's round. Because that's how the magnets are going to pull it. That's how the magnetism is going to shape it. Okay? And so when this planet hit Earth, it caused the Earth to go back into a molten state. Can you imagine the friction? Can you imagine the heat that happens when a planet hits another planet? Can you imagine? Okay, these things gellify. They turn into gel. The heat is incredible. Okay, and so the chunks coming off of that are globules. And those chunks then slam against other planets, and it continues this process. And that's why you see the moon. The moon formed from the accretion disk that formed around the Earth as it was forming and condensing. And the moon, as it got larger and larger from these chunks that are hitting it, eventually sucked up the chunks that were nearby and began to orbit around the Earth. And it probably started orbiting the moment it hit. Like there were chunks that began to form just from the gravity pull of the Earth itself. This is how the moon formed. I know there are tons of theories that claim the moon is hollow, that the moon is a space alien ship, and that there's nothing in it but aliens, and they use the moon to watch us. I know those theories exist. I understand. But there's this thing called tides. And in order for the moon to have enough gravity to pull the tides, it must have mass. Okay, it's not just magic. There's actually science backing why our moon orbits the Earth as it does. And notice, and this is great to see, the moon is not perfectly round. It's close to being perfectly round, but it's not quite. And that's why it stays facing the Earth. And we have a dark side of the moon and a light side of the moon, so to speak. Okay, that's why. And so the heavy side of the moon stays in this orbit. Now, this is very, very critical for you to understand when it comes to this theory that came out of this paper that this gentleman submitted. Okay. Feel free to read these as we go. Okay, that talks about plate tectonics. This is why, okay, when the Earth was first forming, okay, there were layers. This is where plate tectonics comes into play. There were layers as chunks and stuff hit the Earth, and it's forming into this mass. And those layers became the crusts that now twist, turn, and move on our planet, or under where we stand on our planet, miles and miles and miles down. These plates, because the center of the Earth is magma. Okay, and so they're sitting on this magma, this portion of the Earth that has a lubricating effect. And so these plates move over time. And that's why when you look at some of these pictures of the planets, I mean, if you look at South America right there, it fits right into Africa. And if you look, I don't know, let's see if I got another slide here. Yeah, here. Right here. Look at Africa on the left. You can see how that's broken apart. Look how Iran, Iraq, the Middle East there fits right into Iraq. Yeah, that's easy to see that broke off. It's easy to see that. And you can see Greenland up there at the top. You can see how these things have moved. Okay, now this is critical for you to understand. Over billions of years, this has been happening. Fine, if you want to believe that God created it old, that's fine. We're going to stick with basic science here. So there's no imagination needed. Over billions of years, the universe has no age. It never started. It will never end. Over billions of years, this planet, the crusts moved. It didn't, in other words, it didn't take a deluge to cause this. This is natural movement of the planet's surfaces. Normal. Okay, nothing crazy here. And the reason why our Earth isn't perfectly round like this, but it is spheroid shaped, meaning that it has a bulge, a 45-kilometer bulge in the center of it. Can you imagine why it's like that? Why would it have that bulge? Because it's spinning. And the gravity doesn't hold it in the same shape because it's pulling the outside physical mass out. And so as the Earth formed, it's spinning. right? It's spinning. And that glob, like I said, that molten glob, guess what it's going to do? It's going to form the shape of the rotation that the Earth is spinning in. There are very specific mass calculations, shaping calculations, fire, like temperature calculations that go into this. Okay, so there's reason for it. And while the Earth was still molten and forming, the moon was there. Because remember, the planet came in, hit the Earth, brought it back to gel. So both the moon and the Earth were jelly-like, spheroids. And the moon is already rotating around. And it just might be that because the moon is already rotating around, that the mass of the planet pulled the moon lopsided. That's a theory. It's a thought as to why the moon is the way that it is. Okay. What you've got to understand is then, what this man is claiming in this article, okay, what he is saying is, the Earth with all its mass and all the oceans and everything, in a single day, about every 12,000 years, flips, just like that effect I showed you earlier. Now think in your mind, what would happen to all of the oceans when the Earth stopped or moved into an entirely different rotation in one day? Excuse me, sorry. What's going to happen to the ocean? Okay, it's going to do the same thing that happens in your swimming pool where there's an earthquake. If you've ever lived in Southern California and had an earthquake like I did, the whole pool begins to rock. And if you get a strong enough earthquake, literally half the pool will unload with water. It'll just dump it out. Okay? Take that concept to a planet size and imagine what that ocean is going to do should the planet tilt on its axis like that. Now, this man's theory says that this is a repeating cycle, that this happening, and I'm going to describe it here in a minute, this happening happens every 12,000 years. Like it's just like the picture showed. You would see the nut spin, 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 meaning it's flip, 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 flip. You remember seeing that? Okay, this guy is, I'll show you again. This guy is saying that this happens every 12,000 years. Okay, now watch this. I was sent this by a person. Now here, before I get to that, hang on. Okay, so here, look. Do you see how he has it, how he has the Earth drawn? Now, I don't know if he's actually saying that this is the magnetic pull and it's simply red. You can see the three axes here. And it's simply red because of the magnetism and it's bulging like that, or if he's actually saying that the Earth formed this. I don't know. But this is the representation he gave. And as you can see, that is quite a bit different than this, isn't it? Now, here was the beginning when after I had promoted it, I began to look at this and I'm like, well, this is interesting. If you look at India, between Africa and this giant mountain, I don't even know what that is, but this giant mountain on the right, or bulge, look how India sinks, it's showing it's sinking down. And then look at the height of Africa by comparison. I'm talking about right here on the right-hand side. Okay? And when you think of what, well, water is going to settle out into a sphere. The water is not going to settle out into these weird positions because the Earth is that shape. It's going to go ahead and still form a sphere, because that's the tightest form it can form for something that's sucking in. Okay, that's thermodynamics. Okay, so continuing here. Now look, now this is the critical thing. Now, you see the bulges? Okay, you see the bulges? Now this dude is claiming right here. Okay, look at the wing nut on the left, and then look at the planet in the center. And he's got, what his claim is that the magma is not a sphere. It has moved into these bulges. This is claim. It's moved into these bulges, and it causes there to be a wonky, weird spinning inertia for the planet. And here's the thing. He's claiming it's going to have the same inertia and forces as this wing nut, or similarly. You're just going to take that and expand it out. Now think about this for a minute. If you look at the wing nut here, a full third of its weight is way out here. Look how far that is. If you were to structurize that into a planet, that wing nut would be coming way out past the surface of the planet in scale. if you were to scale the wing nut so that the center of that wing nut right there is the planet, okay, you would have these enormous, enormous wings that far exceed to scale what is happening here in the planet. The wing nut has its weight distributed way out there. Whereas his claims in this article is that there's just a polarizing change in the magnetics of the iron that's down in the center of the earth. And that flip in polarization initiates this weird flip because the earth is wonky in its balance. The concern I have here is, first of all, that it's not a match for match. He's comparing apples to oranges. This is not the same effect because that wing nut's balance is entirely distributed differently than the earth. And he doesn't account for why all of this mass in the center sphere went like that, formed like that. He's not, I mean, this would have to happen in the original formation of the planet. This doesn't just begin to bulge out from the center, because if it did, you would see the entire earth bulging out like that. And what he's talking about there in this picture is not enough. Look at this here again. There is not enough. If you look at his weight distribution here, look, does that look like a wing nut? It doesn't. It's also got 3 axes. Okay, the wing nut is totally different in how it's distributing all of its weight. The wing nut has thin wings that stick out. These are round masses. Okay, so folks, this is what has happened here. He has taken this real effect that happens in weightlessness and just simply pasted that to what's happening with the planet. Now follow this. Follow this. I was sent this by someone this week. Okay. Thank you, Knight of the Wolf, for sending this to me. This was critical to my understanding what was happening here and why I'm not thinking it's the way it is. Okay, so this was a video of a gentleman named Douglas Vogt. Okay, now what this guy did is he took all the ages and all of these kind of dimensions found in the Bible of people, look here on the right, and he added those up to get this number 2046. And so what he did is this guy picked out events over time between then and now, from the Younger Dryas, when supposedly this happened, from about the Younger Dryas, about 11,000 BC. And he has traced these numbers to equate out to the same math as this 12,068 years between each of these events happening. And you can go to, it's right there. It's the Diehold Foundation. It's series 4. I got it right there. You go there right there, or you can go there anytime you want and see it. Now, the thing that I don't like about this kind of thing is that you're now, specifically as just a person looking at this, you're just cherry picking dates. And what he did is he aligned his dates to Jewish events and Jewish people in history. Okay. And he even included some of his proclamations in that number, which is kind of freaky. And he broke the number down to decimals. So if something happened mid-year, he would move it to like a 0.5 or 0.6 or 0.7, which again is sketchy if you're trying to find something. But I'm still not to the point that made me say there's no way this is happening. So my point in looking at this was, if that's true, what he's talking about, if what he is saying is true, and these events actually were the exact addition in order to reach 12,068, and some program made sure people were born on this date, died on this date, did these things on this date, these events happen on this date, and every single thing is in line, folks, that's called a program. There's no freedom in that space. There is no freedom happening. If you believe in that, then you believe that this is a program, that there is no such thing as free will. Because this is like saying you drop a box of Cheerios from a plane, they will self-align in words to the encyclopedia. That's what it's saying here. And it just, there's a point when you have to say this is being stretched too far. Now, this is the biggest thing of all of them. That wasn't even the big thing. So I'm looking at this now. What's the key thing? Now I'm going to show you the thing again, the effect. Okay. Oh, not that one. I was going to show that one in a minute. This one here. Nope, not that one. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Okay, so this here. Now, the effect you're seeing, what is missing in comparison to the Earth? Some of you are going to get this. This is what I was watching this in the middle of it, and it struck me. And I was like, wait a minute, there's a massive element to this missing that would profoundly affect and actually keep this from happening. Do you know what it is? It is. About to show you. Are you ready? I'm going to get into that in a minute. The moon. Looking at the Earth right here. Let's say the Earth suddenly stopped and it did this. This is what I wanted to show you. This is the effect he's talking about. Imagine right there. There's the move. Okay. That kind of move would basically blanket the entire planet with water. If you look at America, his claim, and I watched this video, his claim is this, that the West Coast, because of the way the Earth spins, at the moment of this inertia happening, a 500-foot wave of salt water would begin to move to the coast, and at 300 to 400 miles an hour would then obliterate the entire United States. And the entire United States would be underneath 200 to 300 feet of salt water. Additionally, when this happened, there would be, his theory was that there would be a nova, that the sun would nova, and there would be an electromagnetic CME because of this decoupling that's happening to blast through the solar system headed right for Earth. And do you know what happens when it hits this planet? This is all part of the electromagnetics and electrical aspect of what's happening here. Do you know what would happen? Okay, all the atmosphere on one side of the planet would eventually be obliterated in a few minutes. A vacuum. Okay, no atmosphere, which means superheating, which means instantly the whole surface, whatever is exposed right there, is going to be blasted with enough heat to cause glass beads to form, like we see at the base of the pyramids. That pyramid that's burnt, I thought I had a picture of it. Let's see if I got a picture of it. There's a pyramid that's burned. Did I get a picture of it? Nope, I don't got it. But I do have here, the nova, the collapse. And then it forms these balls at the bottom, these things here. Glass beads. And the reason why the glass beads form on the surface is from heat. On the other side of the planet, there is the atmosphere is intact. And so what happens is, over the coming few weeks, 1,000-mile, 800-mile, 300-mile-an-hour winds begin to come around the other side of the planet that's been obliterated by the CME. Remember what we talked about earlier? What happens when compression happens? Heat. So as all the atmosphere begins to move from the other side of the planet that didn't get blasted, begins to move into the other side of the planet that doesn't have an atmosphere, you get compression and you get massive heat. And his claim was that you're seeing surface temperatures on the order of 300 degrees, 400 degrees. Every 12,000 years. Every 12,000 years is the claim. Meanwhile, you've got water covering basically every surface of the planet. Everyone is going to get flooded. Nobody escapes. And if you look at the pyramid here, you can see. Okay, you can see there's water there. There was water. You can see right there. The erosion shows there's salt water there, and it's easy to see that the water level went to there, and they have the deposit, the salt deposits, everything. Now picture this in your mind. The entire world is basically flooded with salt water. So wherever that salt water goes in the ground, guess what? That forms salt in the ground so that no vegetation is going to be growing there for a long time. You have boiling water from the electromagnetic decoupling that happens that superheats from the resistance of the electromagnetics being resisted because they have been decoupled. And so they have to recouple, and that recoupling causes a tremendous amount of heat to form in the center of the planet, which then causes, get this, level 10 to 12 earthquakes for 2 to 3 weeks. Tell me any tunnel that is under the United States right now that is within 2 miles, 3 to 4 miles of the surface that isn't totally obliterated by these earthquakes. His claim is that you're literally, for weeks and weeks, a level 10 non-stop shaking. You think your shelter's going to hold up in that? You think your shelter's going to be waterproof enough to be able to hold 300 feet of water over your head? Do you really think any mountains are going to be left when water moving at 300 miles an hour at 400 feet obliterates everything in its path? And I'm not just talking America. This is worldwide. There will be certainly different layers of severity, but the claim is that this is happening every 12,000 years. Folks, how does anything not build on that? It takes years just for the water level to go down. I mean, nothing survives this. That's the point. Nothing. Nothing survives. This is a sterilization of the entire planet. And let me tell you something, folks. You would not have these kinds of shapes. I hate it that I have to go through it like this. I hate this. But watch, I got to get to it. Here. Folks, you're not going to have these hard ridges like you see. That's not going to happen. You're not going to be having these cliff effects that are going on that you see on the left. Everything would just smooth over into a mud ball because it's happening every 12,000 years, man. There's no time for mountains to form, dude. This thing is being covered over into mud time after time after time after time again. And the claim is that obviously this has been going on since the beginning because according to this theory, the way the earth formed, as they show here, it's wonky. So it's been doing these deluges over and over and over and over again. Folks, there's no way there could be life on this planet. There's no way. There's no way. I get the idea of a deluge, and I think it happened. It was called the Younger Dryas. It was an attack, in my opinion. I totally buy into that concept that the earth was flooded. I get it. I know the science, and I've told you guys the science before. And the pyramid shows it right there. So I'm not saying there wasn't a flood. I'm not saying there wasn't a deluge. I'm not saying that our history and all these mythologies, which we're going to look at today, they're lying when it comes to talking about this incredible impact that happened on the globe. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying the idea, follow this, the idea of something like this that's even worse than the Younger Dryas, that's just an asteroid. Something like this that's planetary, that's happening every 12,000 years. Folks, there's no way we would even have what we have now. There's no way. The diversity, the balance, the ecological balance, the weather, everything that it is, there's just no way. It takes years and years and years just for the atmosphere to begin to clear with something like this because the heat changes, temperature changes. And I didn't even tell you on the other side of the CMA, when the air is leaving that space and going to the other side of the planet, the temps are dropping to -200, 300 degrees. Everything is fast frozen. Feet, layers and layers and layers deep into the ocean, into the mass of the earth. The point I'm making is there's no way this could be happening, folks. There's no way. There's no way. This is the same kind of idea as someone who wants to prove, let's say, flat Earth and says the way you know that the Earth is flat, just walk outside your door and look at the horizon, and there's all the proof you need right there. And he's saying this with this science that he's using. And it's twisting things so that, in my opinion, it becomes fear porn. And it's not healthy. Because if you think about it, I mean, if you watch the video with Douglas Vogt, his opinion is it's going to happen in 2046. It's like 20 years from now, 21 years. Folks, if it was going to be happening in 2046, I promise you the weather we'd be having right now, the earthquakes we've been having right now, everything that's happening on the earth right now would be 10 times worse because we'd be getting close to this. That pole would be going way out. And so for me, it's hard for me to absorb this. I'm okay if that's the way it is and we really are doomed, then we'll have to make sense of life in that way. And that's fine. I'm not holding to anything. But if you look at history, if you look at the earth, if you look at the science and what we actually see in the cores that we're drilling, what you're seeing is a changing in climate, but it's the natural process of heating and cooling that happens to any climate. It's not because it's getting deluged every 12,000 years. It's the natural expansion, compression of everything. Now you see it, now you don't. And that is the rhythm that we see. And so in my opinion, and this is where I really wanted to get to, and this is actually a major reason here that I want you guys to be paying attention. and using your common sense. Okay, where is it? Here, remove here. Okay. So here, before I show that, here is the question I asked to Grok in regards to the moon. And, you know, I don't want to just take all the time doing this because I got some great stuff coming up here. But this is the answer that Grok gave me when I said, doesn't the moon affect this whole shift in pole? And it's like, of course. The Grok was, of course. And here's another big question. With the degree and level that paper was written at, okay, why would they not mention the gravitational pull of the moon affecting this? The moon doesn't even exist in the article. It's the word moon is used twice in the entire article. And it's this massive gravitational force that does what? It stabilizes the rotation of the Earth. The whole point of the moon is that it has stabilized us into this axis tilt and rotation that we have. Stabilized. Do you really think that wing nut, when it's in space, if somebody had a magnet going around at the same speed, it would still be doing that flip? Of course not. The magnetics are totally different. Well, that's our situation. Why is this paper ignoring that? Totally ignores it. I think that's a major flaw. It would be like if I'm restoring a car and I don't restore the wheels. I leave the rusty wheels and old tires on the car. I just ignore them. And I build this beautiful car, awesome hot rod, but it's got 1950s tires and wheels on it that are rusty. Why did you not why did you not address that? And that's what I do when I read this article. It's like, why would you not address the rotation of the moon? Here's another question I asked. Okay. And then if you guys want to read this, I went into the lack of evidence for core phase changes. So his theory that there's a polarizing phase change at the center of the Earth. There's no seismic, magnetic, geochemical evidence for such cyclic phase transitions in Earth's core. And see, you would never know that because you're not a scientist. So it utilizes aspects of what's happening in a language that you can't and don't understand without intense study. Like I said, you got to be a scientist to fully understand it. And so you can take critical factors that really impact this theory and you can just obfuscate them, burying them under the evidence that supports what you want. In other words, you're cherry picking. And it even says that here on the next slide, I think. Cherry picked right there. Weaknesses. He dismissed well-tested mechanisms like CO2 forcing, Milankovitch cycles, and solar variability, which match observed data that we have. His evidence, e.g. saline soils, abyssal heat, is cherry-picked and lacks causal links to core effects. And that was one of the things I said earlier when we were looking at the planet itself. It has these bulges of magma coming out on the ends of it. Why? Let's just talk about why. Cite that. And it doesn't. I went through all that, talked about all that. And so, finally, and this is the big one here, look at this. Does it align to the Great Awakening that we're talking about here? If in 20 years all of us will be dead and the entire Earth will be a mud bath, does that follow the Great Awakening thought processy? That we're going to find out all this stuff and our awareness is going to grow exponentially, but in just 20 years, everybody's basically gone, all but maybe 1/2 of 1/10 of 1%. Does that follow in line with the idea of this? Look at where we're at, folks. We're in the resonation point with, theoretically, the Great Pyramid civilization founded in 45,100 BC. If you see this map, well, you see the sacred geometry in play and you see the perfection. But you start throwing in every 12,000 years one of these deluges, which would have been happening all this time. It is happening repeatedly on this scale that we've already shown to be in direct organization with our history, with our past. And if you're talking about deluges over and over and over again, well, then there was nothing to build from this 11,500 BC attack. And the stuff that we're finding in the northern part of Africa and these enormous sites that they have found have been made into the earth as, what would they be called? They would be designs in the earth that help to facilitate electromagnetic excitation. And we've seen those on the surface in Africa. what's the name of that gentleman in South America or South Africa that talks about that? I can't remember. Michael, I can't remember his name, but he talks about these forms that were built by ancient people that resonate with the earth. Folks, those would have all been gone. Gobekli Tepe would have been gone. Okay, meaning that it would have never existed. There would have been cataclysms happening over and over again before they could have built Gobekli Tepe, so that then we could see Gobekli Tepe now. My point is that this thing is happening. Repeat it. Nothing lasts. Everything keeps getting coming, and you're not going to be able to build a society, a civilization. That's my argument. And it doesn't follow the Great Awakening principles. And if you go back here, which I didn't even talk about, what is the condition of the human when no sunlight exposure happens for over 30 years? Because you're going to be covered up in water, buried down in a tunnel, and underneath 300 feet of soil and nonsense that's gathered from the wave that went over the United States. Nobody survives this. Nobody. There's no novelty there. It's just death. How can a human survive without vitamins, minerals, basic necessities for decades and decades and decades? Because everything's going to be covered in salt. That's all going to have to wash out. So you can't grow any plants. I hope you have 30, 40, 50 years, maybe even enough food to feed the next generation after you, because they still might be in the hole you're in. And what kind of psychology are you going to have? They've already put people down in caves, and in 30 days, they already were completely on another planet psychologically. That's the exact position of people who are hiding in caves, thinking that it's going to be okay. You psychologically cannot stay sound in that environment. People get crazy just being stuck in their house for a week. They start having fits and needed to get outside in the wintertime. Imagine being stuck in a hole or stuck in a cave for 20 years, 30 years, waiting for all this stuff to settle out. You see, there's not really good backing to uphold what basically the Younger Dryas caused, and turning it into this other thing, to me, is fear porn. It's fear porn. Okay, enough of that. Let's get into the good stuff. Okay, now, as you know, last week we talked about the 4 functions of mythology. And the reason why we're talking about this is this begins to help us understand why we think in the West how we think, why the East thinks how it thinks in a basic general sense, why their spiritualities are oriented to identity, and why the spiritualities in the West are oriented to relationship. And there's a real reason for that, because identity is uniting and relationship is separation coming together. Critical. And so what we do is, to understand why this happens, we look at the mythology that raised these societies. What were the thinking processes? What were the teachings? What was the knowledge? What was the awareness? What was the metaphysic that was taught to these people as children? Because they're going to carry that up into adulthood. Okay? And it's the mythology that one bases their life principles upon, because it's a measure of one's awareness, and it cradles the individual over their entire life. And as we can see, is the pedagogical function to center, integrate, and carry the individual through the various stages and crises of life: childhood dependency, responsibilities of maturity, reflection in old age, and transition into death. The pedagogical function. What do you know? What have you learned? What is your awareness? This is what's going to carry you when you're in crisis, is realizing I'm in a bigger picture here. The crisis doesn't last forever, and I just simply do this, that, and the other thing to begin to move my way or encourage my way out. And it's based on your awareness, what you know, so that you don't repeat history. You see, and so that you don't repeat the negative things that you did in your life. You build a mythology so that this pedagogical function is in play when you are faced with a similar or the same situation. You'll make better decisions. And it's because your mythology is building, it's bringing about a greater and greater awareness and connectivity with your living life, with you. And so the pedagogical function helps one to grasp the unfolding of life with integrity while adumbrating its layers of realities. It inspires the intellect, resulting in maturity, enrichment, and realization. The pedagogical function undergirds the entirety of one's development. And so if we want to know how the ancients thought, we study their mythology. This will tell us why they worshiped the gods they did, why they were polytheistic, why they were monotheistic, why they chose this god and not that god, why they were inspired in this region and not that region, because it's an environmental, personal, it's all encompassing, this mythology. And societies have mythologies, and that's called the sociological function. And so the society is going to try to get you to align, just in its natural state, to the societal aspects and characteristics. You see? And you know what happens to a person when they leave society. They're ostracized. I mean, if you start thinking differently and you don't fall into line and you get these weird ideas, society resists you. And this is all part of the sociological function of people's mythology. And when a person has a certain social function that they have subscribed to, namely a particular religion, right? That's the basis of their understanding of what a human being is, what a society is, what a god is, what metaphysics is. You see, you see? Okay, all that is encompassed in the mythology. Okay. So by studying mythologies, we find out what's going on. Okay. So what is a mythology? Mythology refers to a collection of stories, beliefs, or traditions that a society uses to explain the world, its origins, and the forces that shape it. These narratives often involve gods, supernatural beings, heroes, and or symbolic events. So mythology serves four purposes. Metaphysical, provide meaning to the world, because the universe is not inherently filled with meaning. Meaning comes about from your personal life and experience. Render a relation with the scientific and celestial. So it needs to have a cosmological cohesion with you. And this is why so many people are so upset right now, because we've been finding out, hey man, so many of these scientists at NASA have been lying to us and trying to sell us an agenda, trying to get us to subscribe to things that actually aren't true. And that article I mentioned earlier is kind of taken on that sort of flavor, that it's got truth in it, but it twists it in such a way that, like, well, you're freaking screwed. And a mythology opens a person. An appropriate mythology will open a person to the world so that they embrace crisis as well as glory. They are balanced and within equilibrium because the mythology is in tune and in line with their real experience, their real cosmos, and their real metaphysic, combined with their pedagogical. You see? And this is where peace is found. This is where harmony is found. This is where equilibrium is found. And that's why those things are so absent right now for so many, because all these things are in flux, because we're finding out, hey, wait a minute. What I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing doesn't align to what I've been taught. You see, and it's because of the mythology that's been put into us here in the West. And this is what we're going to keep studying. Establish moral and social codes, of course, the sociology, and obviously inspire responsible behavior through awareness, because a person doesn't become responsible through threat. They might obey through threat, but they don't become responsible, self-responsible through threat. They come into a responsible state through awareness. A larger and larger perspective, so that when you see a decision, you think, hey, I can see a lot of things outside this decision because I'm very aware. And I can then project with my imagination and patterns. I can then figure out, if I make that decision, that's a bad idea. That's called discernment. And your mythology directly feeds and is incorporated into your discernment. Are you following why it's so important? Okay. Why is that not going forward? Wait a minute. What is happening? Why did that just jump? Okay, let's try again. Here we are. Mythology upholds a moral framework by rooting identity with an ever-changing awareness, traditions, and communal bonds. This is key. Follow that. Offers or upholds a moral framework by rooting identity within ever-changing awareness, traditions, and communal bonds. Now you see it, now you don't. Traditions now are different then than they are now. If I continue to try and carry out the traditions that were done by people 3,000 years ago, my metaphysic is going to get messed up, because I'm basing my metaphysical function of mythology on a 3,000-year-old idea. And you can see how, wait a minute, the Sumerians actually believed in a different universe than what we are. They believed in a geocentric universe, whereas we are actually a heliocentric universe. So their mythology, if you try and integrate that into your own life, you're going to have conflict. And that's exactly what is happening right now, because mythologies are being torn to bits, because we're finding out all this stuff that's been hidden from us. Mythology guides people through life's phases by fostering growth and insight from cradle to grave. This makes sense. I've been talking about that. Mythology illumines the human experience by nurturing meaning into a meaningless universe. This was a tough one for me when I was leaving religion, because I thought the meaning of the universe was about creating this setting so that people could learn and grow and manifest higher and higher awarenesses. You see, but the universe doesn't have that meaning in it. That meaning comes from your mythology. The universe is opportunity. It is available opportunity and perspective. And so it is from your experiences and your perspective from those experiences and opportunities that creates meaning. Because when I go through a crisis with my wife, that crisis, when we come out of it, has great meaning and impact. And as you contemplate your life, this is what brings gravity. This is what gives you a will to keep going, because you have these in you, and they foster vitality, because it gives you what you are seeking for, which is meaning, purpose, identity, these kind of things in the human life. Okay, in a broader sense, mythology isn't, and by the way, I wrote this stuff. This isn't copied down. I wrote this stuff. In a broader sense, mythology isn't just false stories, as the modern term myth sometimes applies. And that was something that always made me mad, was when I was a Christian and people calling Christianity a myth. That made me really angry, because myths have this connotation that they're not fully true. And it's true. They're not fully true, just like movies aren't fully true, but they inspire you. And just the same way a movie inspires you that's not true, mythology inspires you. Inspiration for aspiration. And that's the role of the mythology. Mythology is a way humans process the unknown, whether it's the stars, seasons, or life's mysteries, often blending historical events, male, with imagination, female, to evoke understanding. That's a great word. Inside understanding that comes from within, as you identify yourself with the nature that you are and the nature that you're in. That happens through mythology, imagination, and pattern. You see? In fact, some myths at times encode, critical here, encode real experiences that actually happened. Excuse me. Like floods, Noah, migrations, Exodus, and astronomical phenomenon, the precession of the equinoxes in symbolic form. See? So you have the precession of the equinoxes, which are talked about in mythology, our past mythology, because all Western religions come out of astrotheology, right? So that's a real thing. The celestial and its rotation and its timing and all that, that's real. So by relating the mythology, say, naming all the planets and stars gods, and then relating the perfection, the temperament, how they're behaving, and what is going on with what they're doing out there in that realm, and relating those activities, the supernovas to calamity in your own life, the organizing of the plane, the can't remember the name of it, but the plane that forms outside of the planet, the organizing of that is the same idea as your life self-organizing from all the cataclysms that are happening around you in your life, just in your daily. And so in the same way this builds meaning, it builds planets, the accretion disk, it builds planets. So the universe builds planets, and you're building meaning and experience. You see, we're creatively, the universe is creative and you also are creative. You're creatively building this identity, this understanding that the patterns that I see out there are the same patterns of my own life. And that's why you would align your spirituality to a celestial idea, because you are seeing these things happening in front of you. And this inspires you because you realize I'm part of that same function. The supernova is related to me. I'm part of that, part and parcel. And see, when you begin to identify yourself with that, there's no separation. And without separation, what happens? There's no anxiety. There's no loss. There's no separation. It really gets beautiful when you start to get it. Now, watch this. I'm looking forward to telling you about this. Okay. Mythology is both a cultural artifact and a lens, part storytelling and part philosophy, part imagination, part pattern. through which we make sense of our place in the universe and then discover identity. You see, you find your place. This is, oh, I see. This is where I'm at. This is what I am. Oh my goodness. And you begin to realize through awareness what you see in your mind, what you are, because I can't put that into words, and neither can any book. What you are, and we talked about this last week, what you are can't be put into words. You have to see it with your mind, imagination, and pattern, which brings me to this. This is a symbol that I entirely invented. And all of my GoFundMe people are going to get this on a hoodie and a snow cap embroidered someday when I can do it, because I totally want to thank all of the people that have been supporting me at this time. And I'm really proud of this. And let me tell you about it. Now, what you're looking at is, let me get it nice and large here so you can see it better. Okay. Now, what is in the center? A circle. Now, Jung used to call the soul a circle. And so this idea of the circle and center is the God that's within everything. It's the inspiration that's within everything. It's the essence within everything, that gold dot. Okay. And what sprouts from that? The tree of life. As above, so below. Identity begins to happen. But that's the tree. But what do you have? You have this black and white. That's the illusion of duality. See, I think you want to see my face while I talk about this. That's the illusion of duality. And that illusion of duality will keep you from seeing the larger perspective available to you. And so, in your mind, you must pass through the illusion of duality into the incomprehensible aspect of the sacred geometry that forms the universe. And that's why I put squares. And the filled in dots are unique, impactful experiences in your life that are past duality and bring about an understanding of the larger world, of the larger magnificence that is in play round about you, always. And those opportunities are always there. But you must see past the dualism to fully realize them. And once you fully realize them, then you have this outer layer here. And that's what I have, is all these dots. That's the universe, maybe many universes. And this is all opportunity. And what is all of this structured by, in a certain sense? The Platonic solids: ether, fire, earth, water, and air. And these comprise this illusion that we're living in. Okay, now when you look at this symbol that I've drawn, then it can become inspiring, because you then begin to see yourself in that picture I just gave you about that symbol. You see, you can see you're the same way. And that center that is within that tree is the center that is within you, that is in the center of everything else. Bringing it together, blowing it apart, organizing it, and chaos. Because now you see it and now you don't. And this is an expression, a personality of the universe. Think of the layers of dimension in the universe as the layers of personality in yourself. That's what this symbol is pointing towards. The layers that surround you, the layers that are everywhere, are also the exact same layers and functions within you. These things are united. And when you see these things as united, goodbye anxiety, hello peace. And that's what I'm trying to convey in this image that I have drawn up. And that's why I want to give it to everybody, because I find it inspiring, and I hope that it inspires others. Now, continuing, does your mythology bring you into accord with nature or ask you to rule it? Is it oriented to conflict, or is it oriented to contrast? You see the dysfunction that begins to happen if you think that you're supposed to rule it. Does your mythology reinforce the cosmology you're in, or does it dumb it down? What do you see happening right now with cosmology, with NASA? Trying to dumb everybody down. They don't want people to know all the details. What do you see the CIA doing right now? Dumb everybody down. Catastrophe, catastrophe after catastrophe. Keep them from ever focusing, keep people from ever being in a state of peace. Because then they'll start thinking. And if they start thinking, they will start thinking for themselves. So you are to follow the model that is handed to you by the sociological society. And they are handing you the cosmology. And so you see here, does your mythology align you with other societies or plot you against them? The role of a mythology would be to unite these things. The reason why other societies are so ostracized in the Western mythologies is because they come out of warring tribes. They come out of a situation on this planet that was horrendous, meaning there's no high technology happening here. It's hard work. The winter's coming. You got to have food supply. There's no refrigerators, right? And the winter itself, you got to survive that. And then you got all the agriculture. You got to be on it just to live. And so life was a battle in many senses, because nature is constantly trying to freeze you or overheat you. Bugs are constantly getting in your plants and eating your plants, harming your harvest. You are constantly doing that, you see? And so you're going to build a mythology in that reality that's hard like that. That's hard. Like those neighbors are no good. They're worshiping the wrong gods. They're doing it wrong. We got it right. If they take us over, our mythology dies with us. So if we're going to keep this way of life, if we're going to protect our sanctity as a tribe, we must destroy those other ones before they destroy us. That kind of mentality, that conflict-oriented mentality, is going to twist that mythology into a war god mythology. And what do we have out of the West? War gods. We have rulers, kings, that are going to tell you what to do and how to behave. And you do not think. Do as we say. Our society, in other words, the tribe, is depending on you to be at one with this tribe, so that when we go fight those people, none of us are questioning that we are moral in what we are doing. This is the right thing to do, to go kill all those people. Folks, you have to have a hard mythology for that. To get someone to go out and with all of their heart go and kill strangers, you have to have a very hard and specific fanatic type of mindset to do that, to harden up that much. And what do you see undergirding these ancient religions? Hardness. Hardness, ready for it, ready for the fight. Because there's no time for contemplation. There's no time for sitting around the fire. We got to get stuff done now. Now. You see? So nobody's sitting around and thinking about philosophy and like, oh, where does this go? And what is exactly going to happen to me? And what is the meaning of my life? And what? Those questions are not even quite in the mind, because there is no I. There's no I, meaning there is no identity other than the group. And that is how people identified with their group, with their society. So if the society dies, their meaning dies, right? And this is how you will inspire these people to do whatever it takes to keep that society moving. And this is where that dominator thread began. It began in the deserts of the Levant. Does your mythology create a sense of self-responsibility or encourage self-destruction? I'll leave that for you to decide. I don't want to hinder it with barriers. So a healthy mythology unlocks life without defining or absolutes, initiates without determining. Do you follow that? It should unlock your life without putting you into a pattern. It should unlock your life so that it will initiate that inspiration, but you will then carry out the aspiration. You will carry out that which it has brought to you. So someone brings you a gallon of gas, you throw it in the car and you can drive it. Okay. Someone brings you an appropriate mythology that aligns you to yourself and aligns you to the universe and your sociology. If you have that in your life, you initiate without determining. You are open to life. You're not trying to come in and say life should be this way, because you're not trying to find a finite. You see, because you're not in a conflict-oriented reality now. You used to be, but you're not anymore. You're in a thought-provoking reality now. And that's one of the reasons why people are waking up. And that's another reason why they're lowering down the amount of cataclysms that are happening. Have you noticed there hasn't been any school shootings in a long time? You see, you notice the intensity of events are lessening and lessening. You see? Accords life with community and science, facilitates without creating. You see, so it facilitates a cosmology, of the way it really is, but it doesn't create it for you. It doesn't say this is the way it is. It opens it to you and says, look at this. What do you see? What do you think? Let's work together. Let's think together on how we can make sense of this. The mythology is open. It doesn't say, this is the way it is. This is the way it is. This is the way it is. And I'm saying a mythology that's in balance, a healthy mythology. It's the ones that are trying to force fit you into a mold. That's where you're going to run into trouble. The mythology needs to be open so that you can develop and use your creative sense and pattern making and all that stuff to bring about, this is the critical, to bring about you, your talents and gifts and ability to share those with the world. Where else are you going to get a lesson like this tonight? Right here. It's coming from me. You're not going to get this anywhere else. This is the uniqueness of me coming out. And hopefully, it's providing some of you with a larger perspective. And that is my role, to simply provide a larger perspective. And therefore, by providing that larger perspective, what then happens? You then can make your own more balanced, reasonable, determined decisions because you understand a larger perspective. And so your discernment goes up. And that's a rush for me because I love helping people's discernment increase. Validates life without judgment or condition. Authenticates without asking. There's no asking permission with the proper authority, with the proper mythology. A mythology that has you asking permission of God, seeking approval from God, and expecting reproof from God, that's a cage mythology. You're seeking, asking, expecting. That's anxiety. That's anxiety. Acting. There is no try. There's simply the act. Well, there's no anxiety there. If I'm trying, I'm acting. There is no try. That's why Yoda said that. There is no try. You either do or do not. You see? Authentic living, man. That's the only way. Renders life with integrity and enrichment. Instructs without compromising. Does your mythology call you a sinner? Call you fallen? It is instructing you through compromising you. That's not healthy. It should render life with integrity and enrichment, not with duty. Integrity and enrichment, blossoming. And if I every day wake up thinking I'm fallen, I'm prone to wander from God, I got to keep myself in line, I'm prone to sin, I'm prone to these things, and I have to have help from somewhere out there in order to be appropriate. Do you see how that is inappropriate? Do you see how that instructs through compromising? You're not really thinking for yourself anymore. You're thinking for the belief system, the mythology that it has put in you. It's important to understand this and understand ourselves. Now, here we go. We move to the cult of Baal. Now, we take this information about mythologies and we begin to look at the map here. Let's see what I got here next. I got a little map over here. Okay, so we look at this map. I can even do this. There. Okay. Hey. All right. So we look at this map and you can see the Canaanites there at the top, the Pharaohs, the Babylon, right? Romans, Judea, the Vatican. Each of these has their own mythology. Each sphere has its own mythology, all right? So these people have an entirely different way of putting together the universe, their neighbor, who they are, their activity, the meaning of life. Every single one of these has a different identity than the other based on their environment, their cosmology, their awareness, their pedagogy. Okay, this is natural, normal, nothing crazy going on. This is how humanity survived through this very difficult age when it was getting going, when we didn't have the technology we have now, when life was much more arduous and difficult. I mean, people were only living into their 50s, if that, 40s. Okay, it's hard. Okay. Now, this drawing was done by Dylan Monroe, and you need to understand that this is not obviously my work. This is Dylan's work, but the work on the right there. What I'm just showing you is that's the Kabbalah tree of life. And the reason I'm showing you that, now this is important. The beauty of this tree of life is that it shows you through symbolism like the tarot, it shows you without using words, this assimilation or this building, this ladder of higher and higher consciousness and awareness. And these are different levels that you're going through as you become more and more aware. So like when you're a little tiny kid, You have no idea how your body's built, why your teeth are falling out as you get older. These kind of things you got to find out. And so your consciousness is at a lower level than what, say, your folks have. They already understand these basic things. They already know what it's like to grow up. They've done it. They've been down that road. And they know the steps. I got to walk before I can run. I got to learn to swim before I can swim. I got to learn to ride the bike before I can ride the bike. There are stages. I got to go get an education in order to get this job I want. Say I want to be a doctor. There are steps I got to take to become a doctor, to become a lawyer, to become whatever. And it's the same exact thing with spirituality. And these ancient cultures, believe it or not, had just as much spirituality as you have now. That inspiration you feel, that desire to understand, that desire to unite with the world, this was in them also. And so they created these maps because all of this is outside of words. And so that's why symbolism is so great and important, because they created these maps to help you understand the deeper fundamental at work. And folks, I've done extensive work on this. I just haven't done my videos yet. Look here. Let's go here. Okay. Now, this tree of life, each one of these spheres is a different kind of energy, and it ties into the chakras. And there are terms that are used in these societies and cultures that help you understand this ladder-like effect of growing in your maturity, of growing in your spiritual awareness, of growing into accord with these things that are larger than you will ever be in the sense of your body here and now. And so it's endless. There's endless development available to you. And this speaks to that. And this is why I mentioned the other day that every single, here's another slide, presentation I haven't given yet. That's why I mentioned that every single emotional experience you can have is rendered in the symbolism of the tarot. One of the reasons I don't do tarot is because it's been so accurate, and I don't want to know my future. But when I've done it, it's been so accurate, it's been scary. And I'm like, you know what? I'd just rather not know my future because my future's been rough for a while now. So it's one of those things where I haven't wanted to know, and I'm just going to let this happen. And you get into trouble, in my opinion, you get in trouble with the authenticity and the spontaneity of life if you begin to try and look into the future as to what's coming. That's also anxiety. You become fully embedded in the now, and you'll never want to know the future, and you won't ever hold to the past, because the now will offer you all the fulfillment you could ever possibly seek. You see, that's why it's important to keep and hold this stuff loosely. But just so you know how accurate this is, here's my wife on the left, the Empress. She's the Empress, and she's also Cancer. And if you were to look at the way my wife functions, that card defines her better than any other, and that's her natural birth card. This is why I mean it's so incredible how effective these things are. But look at what the Empress represents: creation of life, Mother Earth, romance, sensuality, femininity, nature, nurturance, nature. These are its virtues. And then also, like everything in life, there's a positive side and a negative side. So the negative side of this card is disruptive, infertile, insecure, disharmony, negligence, smothering, lack of support, and vice. Those are the vices, you see. And when you find out, this is some lore that maybe you didn't know, when you were forming in your mother's womb, all of the universe, all around us, the galaxy, all these planets all had resonation. They were resonating based on where they were located, how close they are to the Earth, proximity of time, and all that kind of stuff. That electromagnetism, which directly affects our Earth, affected you as you formed in your mama's tummy, because she's an electromagnetic being also, just like you are an electromagnetic being. And all these electromagnetics, the celestial electromagnetics, affect you. This is what shapes your personality, because it's the electromagnetics that are forming the organization patterns for your cells to fall into line to form you. And since we are waves and particles when we resonate, folks, that means that the space that you're born in affects your development. And you will have characteristics that will align to the positions of the planets in the celestial realm, because they were in that area, or they were in a similar configuration as when you were born. And so your whole life, these characteristics that formed off the self-organizing factor of the electromagnetics are what are going to carry your personality through life. And your soul has these potentials in it. And so it enters into, it becomes one with you as an individual right at conception. Life, inspiration, here it comes. And it's going to have characteristics. It's going to have personalities. Look at mine. This is mine. I did mine to be vulnerable. I did mine for you guys. In my tarot reading, the card that I aspire to, my main card, is strength. That is my soul card. That energy, the characteristics of the card carry me through my whole life. The strength. If I realize the full potential, or I realize a strong potential in the strength card, you transform. This is the transformation process. Kenosis, enlightenment. Kenosis in the West, enlightenment in the East. That's the transformation where your energies move from one sense to another sense. And if you realize the deeper and deeper aspects of life, you will transcend the core card that you were born with, the core energies. And these will foster, these will grow, these will blossom into a more deeper, richer character that you don't know until you fully engage in that beautiful. And so my card for becoming is the star card. So what are the characteristics of me? Inspiration, hope, knowledge, fluency, abundance, communicative, and spirituality. Those are my virtues. My vices are hopelessness, and I definitely tend to get that way. Despair, yep, that's me. Mistrust, yep. Disconnection, yep. Disequilibrium, yep. Alienation, arrogance. Why do you think I have been so driven in my alienation cause? You guys hear me use that word all the time. It's a fundamental part of my vices. I've had to deal with it. I left everything that was comfortable. I alienated myself. It's like these cards know these things. They know the personality that the strength card has is eventually going to deal a person that's going to have the strength to walk away from it all in the space of disequilibrium, alienation, disconnection. And this will challenge them to what? Transcend those vices. Utilize those characteristics to become an even more refined individual. This is how you make vices into virtue. That's a basic Hermetic principle. That's the role of life, folks. To transform that which would normally bring you down, to use that as a strength. And in my case, anxiety, disequilibrium, disconnection, right? All of the things that I was saturated in when I left, when I transmogrified from the form that I was into moving here, into leaving all of my normalcy and coming and moving into a forest, I availed myself to become. Do I still have the vices? Yes. Could I have gotten lost in hope and despair and those kind of qualities? Yes. That potential is always there. But you see, if you learn from it, you realize this is actually just a step to become. There's no negativity, so to speak. It's just a challenge. It's a characteristic that has to be amalgamated. In other words, nothing needs to be forgiven. Nothing needs to be fixed. There's no correction necessary. It's an awareness factor. And the problem I have will go away. Anxiety, disability, it will go away the more aware I become. You see, it's not about discipline. It's about awareness. It's not about beating someone into submission. Obey or else. That is not going to teach them. It's going to make them angry and resistive. These things have to be fostered. And that's why life is so challenging, because it challenges you in ways that you would not avail yourself unless you went into the challenge. You have to walk into the fire. That's why the Buddha was always saying all life is a fire, and you accord that. You don't put the fire out. Key. In the West, you're going to put that fire out, right? In the West, you're going to put that fire out. Because life needs to be fixed. It's a problem. There's an issue here. There's an evil thing that's going to destroy us all. You see, fear. It's going to destroy us all unless we believe right, unless we do this. Then it's okay. That's called anxiety. You're instilling anxiety, doing that to people. I mean, that's why I left religion. I didn't want to be a part of a system that was doing that to people, that was putting anxiety to people like that. You see, this is how you see through it. Now, moving on. Let's take that, add to stage. Here we are, the Levant. Yes, where all Western religion came from. We heard Dr. Campbell at the beginning of the talk talking about this. The Levant, the idea that the Orient oriented themselves to the idea of not relationship, but identity, and then the Western mind works through relationship. The Western mind is set up from the Levant, has been set up to think of God as an outside something, and you are not that. But you are to have relationship with that. And how do we have relationship to that? Through identity, through the church, through the sociological function, identity with the right group. Because if you're in the wrong group, in other words, if you believe incorrectly, you don't get to go to heaven. You have to believe as the group tells you. This, remember what I said? Mythology closing in on those minds. Those minds won't be able to get out of that apparatus. So they'll think, the only way I can have a relationship, and it's because I'm separate, the only way they'll be thinking along those terms is because the sociology has formed their pedagogy into that. So they believe it. I'm not one with that. I can only have a relationship, and that relationship happens through a spiritual mechanism called sin and atonement. This all comes out of the Levant, and you guys have heard me talk about it many times. Okay, that's Mesopotamia, Iran and Iraq. This is the Levant. This is where all this sociology comes from. This is a larger picture from 1300 BC, and you can see there, right there, where the Middle East is now, you can see the Hittite Empire, right? The Amorite tribes. Let's get it a little bit bigger here for you. Sorry, let's get a little bigger. The Amorite tribes and the tribal system. There's the Egyptian Empire right there on the upper northeast coast of Africa, the Nile River and so forth. Okay. Now the Sumerians, we'll go back to here now. No, this one here. Now the Sumerians founded Sumer. That's what we were just looking at. Arguably the oldest high society, meaning they had writing, monoliths, and agriculture in 3500 BC in Mesopotamia. They were before then. This is when they had a high society. In 3500 BC, they had writing, they had monoliths, and they had agriculture. This is in Mesopotamia. These cultures mapped the celestial sky. Follow this. They mapped the celestial sky and named the stars and planets after their gods. That's why they were polytheists. If you're wondering, why did these crazy people, why are they worshiping all this? It's because they're worshiping the names of the symbolism and power and representation from the celestial into their rulers here on this planet, the metaphysical. And they saw this as they saw the sky as a map, as a means and ways, like they used it for their agriculture. They used it as a map of a means and ways for one's own self and identity. And so they identified through gods because they're warring nations. And so you got the guys that win and you got the guys that lose. And it's the gods that are in heaven that win, that won, right? So you're going to model your principles, your mythology after the winners. And only the winners are going to write that mythology. You see? Because if the winners don't write that mythology, then you're going to incorporate that of your enemies. And you can't have that. You conquer your enemies and destroy them. And then this is our mythology. And our mythology, we won because we're worshiping the right God. We wouldn't have won as Israelites, let's say. We wouldn't have won as Israelites if we hadn't been worshiping the right God. But because we're worshiping the right God, we prevail. Do you see how that then molds into the mind of these people? Molds into the mind of them, and they cannot think outside of it. Now, the people that came out of this, all early societies, were polytheistic astrologists. The Akkadians, the Amorites, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Kassites. These are who came out of Sumer, which was eventually taken over by the Semites. Who were the Semites? The Canaanites were a Semitic speaking people whose culture, language, and identity developed locally in the Near East. That's the Levant. Distinct from the Indo-European peoples associated with Europe. Semitic-speaking majority fully absorbed the Sumerians by 2000 BC. And guess what? They had their own mythology. Now, what I've traced is I asked Grok, and I took some of the stuff that I learned growing up, and I asked, okay, who developed monotheism? Where did this idea of monotheism come out of? Now, the reason we have monotheism is it came out of the Semites, a marauding, warmongering tribe that comes out of North Africa and the southern part of the Levant. These are fighters. These are hard fighting warriors, okay? Their gods are not female gods. Their gods are male conquering gods. And these gods rule. And they got the idea there is one central God. Because we got all these gods. Who's the ruling God? There's got to be one. And so they came up with the idea there is one central God that rules over all the other gods. And there was a period of time when they still worship all those other gods, as well as the center God. You see that in the Israelite history in Exodus. Okay, they're bowing to the calf. See, they're polytheists. And so you have the leadership of this tribe saying, folks, we ain't doing that anymore. We're going full monotheism. I got the God. I got the guy. He wrote these tablets, and this is the way it's going to be, period. And so you have this monotheistic idea, and all these people start thinking, okay, as long as we keep worshiping this God, we keep sacrificing this God, we continue to battle, or we continue to win all our battles. And so they wrote a mythology that what? Showed them exonerated in all of it. Showed them as winning. Yet did they ever win Canaan? No, they didn't. They sure didn't. Cultures in collision. I spent so much time on this. I want you to see this. Cultures in collision. Here we are. We have Europe and the Levant. This is, as you look at the Levant map, I'll show you before I read this. Here. Okay. Now, if we look at the Levant, let's use the larger slide here. There we go. So in this picture, there, the Levant right there, you can see the Middle East. You can see the Red Sea, all that stuff, the Hittite Empire. Okay, that's all the Levant. So the cultures that developed over on the far right in China and in India, down low, you see those two? See, they are guarded by the Himalayas. They don't have the influx of people into these traditions. So from 4,000, 6,000 BC, they're isolated. They're not being invaded by raiders every other week like what's happening in the Levant, which is just basically a bloody battlefield. That's not happening in India. That's not happening in China. This totally changes your what? Your mythology. So these cultures, guarded by the sea, meaning their sea is on one side, the Himalayas on the other, and then China is so far out, and they're guarded by all these Himalayan and these mountainous regions. These cultures are isolated, and there ain't nobody coming in and infiltrating them. Their religions go back, you see? And so because they're not being infiltrated and constantly fighting in that sense, being taken over, they have a mythology that is very much oriented to nature and aligning with the environment, whereas the Israelites are like, bro, it is snowing or it's raining or it's cold or whatever. The environment is destroying us. The environment must be controlled. We are to have rulership over it. This idea begins to form because it's constantly trying to kill you. Whereas here, these people are more settled. They're agrarian cultures. They're settled in. They're participating in agriculture, and they are settled in. They're smoking cannabis around the campfire every night, and they're contemplating and philosophizing. And so you have a much more elegant mythology that comes out of this contrastive idea. That's why it's such a hard, conflictive idea with the mythologies of the West. Whereas the mythologies that are coming out of India and China have an entirely different beginning that isn't based in war. Yes, they had their wars. Yes, they had their issues, but it wasn't entirely based in that. They saw nature as an expression of oneself, as the supporter of human beings, which it is. And they saw themselves as one with this, not as something to fight and rule over, but something to integrate. That's an entirely different mythology. Integration and oneness. There's no anxiety in that space. Whereas if you have a mythology of conflict and fighting and separation, there's anxiety in that space. So the very beginning, when you first start, you're in conflict in the West because you're a sinner, you're fallen, you're separated. You have a problem, you got to solve it. Whereas in the East, they're not thinking that at all. There is no such thing as sin. There is no such thing as needing to be atoned. That doesn't exist. There is no conflict. Why are you fighting? There is no conflict. Life is a measure of contrasts. And so you have this Buddhistic idea that comes out of this culture that orients one directly and infused with nature rather than something you overcome and usurp. You see? Okay, knowing that, look at how they were different. Europe and the Levant. Europe and the Levant are the oldest of the high societies. The Levant, where all Western religions source, is considered the Near East. And it was a melting pot of differing local tribes battling it out with nature and the enemies which filled the landscape. Life was something to conquer. Neighbors were something to usurp. See it? This goes all the way back to the beginning, folks. If you wonder why the West is still fighting in the Middle East, there's your answer. These cultures specialized warfare and developed metallurgy. That was their thing. Warfare and metallurgy. It's believed the first bronze was found in this area in Sumer. Iron followed thereafter, and with it Rome conquered the world. What do we see the Roman Catholic do? These people developed war chariot tech, which in BC terms is equivalent to a tank. They spent their lives mowing down all resistors and building a mythology of blood, commitment, and sacrifice that was rivaled only by their war sport. These were the dominators. So if you want to know why these societies still are fighting, still do not see all of creation as one, cohesive, they still see it as conflict. We must win. We have the right God. Can't you just see him on the field proclaiming that their God Yahweh is the right God? And you have the same thing happening 5,000 years later. People are still making that claim. That should give you a really good idea of how hard mythology goes into the mind, meaning it forms you. You got to be careful. The metaphysical, the cosmological, the sociological, the pedagogical. Folks, you got to be careful what you subscribe to, because it will affect your choices and decisions and what world you actually do see. See how important it is? China and India establishing high societies multi-millennia after Europe and the Levant. China, a lot of people think China is the oldest. It's not. It's the youngest of the high societies. China is the youngest of the high societies. Understood? 1500 BC, and then India is 2500 BC. The ones in the Levant, 7000 BC. They were, what was the date I gave for Sumer? What was it? 3500 BC. 1,000 years before India. They had high societies. These were naturally isolated from the influence of constantly raiding foreigners and tribes, like I told you. The Himalayan mountains, ocean, and deserts west of China isolated these areas and protected their spiritual vision. Can you see it? Can you see it? That's why I said in part 1 of the God Eaters, it was the trade routes that caused all the commotion. The trade routes opening up from China to bring the silk in, the Silk Road. It's bringing all these people who worship nature, who see nature as the fulfillment, and they're walking right into these groups that believe we got the right God, brotherhood, and all of you folks that believe in nature, we are going to crush you because we got the conquering God. And this is what is happening in real time, 0 BC. And what do you see happen 325 years later? The Catholic Church. We cannot have these religions coming in because it's changing the mindset of our people. They're thinking for themselves. They're identifying with nature. They're leaving the anxious life and uniting. Can't have that. We got to remain in control. We're going to set these people against everyone who doesn't think like them, and that's why it became law in 325. It had nothing to do with truth. It had nothing to do with helping. Nothing. Any more than vaccines. Has nothing to do with truth. Has nothing to do with helping you. The Catholic Church has not changed. They're still running things. Nothing to do with that. Nothing. Okay, so if you think that Constantine went into or believed in Christianity because he had this epiphany, no. This was a tribal decision. And his advisors, and I'm sure he knew himself, unless everybody's under the same mindset, Rome will never make it. Never. And look what happened when they tried to confine everyone down. It never made it. You can't do, this is the point. You can't do that to people. You can't put them in a world and expect them to stay in that world if their experience says otherwise. That's why what is happening right now is happening. Because the mythology that's in our heads here, growing up in this dominator culture, it doesn't align to this idea of awakening and uniting with everyone. It's the same crisis they have been facing in the Levant since 0 BC and the trade routes were opened up, folks. Same. Their spiritual understanding and growth came through extremely different practical means and still carry on to this day. It was not until the trade routes opened in 0 BC that these cultures began to collide with the West through trade. Eastward of Iran were not cultures raised in warfare, so their societal and spiritual approach were very, very different than societies that developed as marauders and war heroes. Isn't it beautiful when you can see it? When you can finally see it and you can understand, oh, that's why. And when you understand that, you realize this is ridiculous what is happening in the Middle East. Ridiculous. There is no reason for this. And you can also see why the Israeli component has been pushing wars. It's part of the Ashkenazi way. You can see where this comes out of when you start to see the mindset of these people. And then look at this. This is awesome. Religions of relationship. That we'll finish this out here for tonight, and then I'll start answering questions because we've been going for an hour and 45 minutes, and I won't have time for questions. So here we go. This is going to make it clear as day. Europe and the Levant, religions of relationship. China and India, religions of identity. Okay, laid that out for you today. Universe is a watch. Universe is a wonder. See the difference? They're trying to make it into a construct that this God made, that they know and understand. China, on the other hand, they're seeing it as a miracle. And there's no way you could put something like that into words. And so you simply revere and appreciate it. It's a totally different perspective of oneself in the world. Totally. Everything is tainted. Everything is divine. Do you see it? Everything's fallen. The world is fallen in the West. You're fallen. Everything is tainted. Everything is bound to be destroyed. Do you see? It's an entirely different philosophy. Whereas everything is divine. Then now you see it. Then now you don't. It's just part and parcel of life. The crises-y, the bad choices you make, the good choices you make, the wonderment. This is all just part of the divinity. That is life. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. This is just life happening. No anxiety, folks. If you're looking for ways to release from anxiety, to find peace, to discover faith, these kinds of things that you can't just do, they are realized by beginning to see the world through ideas of identity, wonder, divinity, without it having to be saved. The world is a paradise. The world is a purgatory. Do you see the difference? You are saved from this world in Christianity so that you can then go be at the one you really want to be in, which is heaven with Jesus. This is an endurance complex here because it's fallen. Mindset is everything. Mindset. What is in your mind? What are you programming your mind with? That's why it's so important. Discernment. What are you sticking in your head? Because it's going to affect your perspective, whether you like it or not. God is personified in the West. We know which God. We know its name. We even know his gender. It's a dude. We know this. And this is his name. Whereas in the East, God is past idolatry, ideas like that. You put an identity label like that on God, that's idolatry. Even if you think it's right, it's idolatry. It's idolatry. When you label the mystery, when you label that which can't be put into words, when you put yourself into a position of being put into words, you idolize yourself. You idolize the God you're worshiping. This is idolatry. That leads to a dead end. This is the seeking outside yourself. This is not understanding. This is seeking outside yourself to find understanding, and no understanding is found there. It's never found there. You are a born sinner. You're born sanctified. You guys see where this is going. A personal God maintains the universe. An impersonal force grows the universe. Listen to the Campbell excerpt I gave at the beginning of this live after this is done, and you'll hear him describing this. A personal God maintains the universe. That's the watch. This God made every single dust, every single bird, every single plant, everything made, every single thing. And it's watched over and lorded over by this thing to make sure, got to keep this thing from falling apart. I got to be right here to make sure it all holds together. No, man. The universe self-organizes. Nature doesn't need a boss. Nature doesn't have a boss. There is no boss situation. And since you're also a nature creature, you also don't need a boss. And the reason you don't need a boss is because of perspective. Your perspective gets wide enough, you never need to be told what to do. You will act appropriately to the mythology that you are embedded. Asking permission, seeking approval, and expect reproof, that is not how you're going to find discernment. That's not how you're going to find good decisions. These things are found inside. By understanding this deeper principle that I'm pointing towards in all of these videos. Identity is secured through commitment. Identity is realized through release. Can you see it? You have to be a part of the right society in the West. The society is everything. You have to be the right. If you're in the wrong society, I mean, even the Christians say none of those Islams are going to heaven. None of the people that believe in blue, they're not going to heaven in Buddhism. No, because those are different societies. And so the Christian thinks like the mythology put into them. I am a part of this society and not that society. And that society is doomed and my society isn't. Narcissism. That's spiritual narcissism. Never forget that. It's spiritual. You are a narcissist if you subscribe to that. There is separation between God and man. There is no separation between God and man. I've harped on that enough. Society should reflect cosmic order. Society is a part and parcel of the cosmic order. Identity is found through group affiliation. Identity is found leaving the group. That's a critical one. You find your identity through your relationship within the sociology and the metaphysic of your Christian belief system. Identity is found through affiliation, separation, and coming together. Forgiveness brings this about. In other words, these are not the same. These are two different things uniting or tempting to. That's not how it works. That's an incomplete thought that will lead you to the wrong space of philosophy. Identity is found leaving the group. What did I do? I left the group. Identity is found, because I'm never going to find my identity saturated in voices, saturated in edicts, saturated in law. How am I going to find identity in that? Because identity is past all those things. So how will I find identity through them? Not. How am I going to find appropriate behavior? Inside the heart. That's why perspective is everything. Because perspective shows the words only the heart can read. Perspective is everything. The larger your perspective, the larger your world, the more appropriate you'll behave. Finally, relation to God is maintained through structure. Relation to divine is maintained through flow. What is the structure of a vortex? Flow. What is the structure of a house? Wood, beams, concrete. There's no flow there. Do you see? Now take that picture into your mind when it comes to spirituality. Am I going to grow and expand if I'm putting my spirituality in a structure, a hard structure, or am I going to grow and expand if I remove that structure and I simply align to flow? I self-organize, just like the wind. Self-organizes into a funnel, self-organizes into a hurricane. Flow is where identity is found. Now you see it, now you don't. You're not the now you see it, you're not the now you don't. You're between. You're all and. Do you see? You're not the yin and yang, you're not the black, you're not the white. You are the yin yang. You have good and evil potential in you. Everything has this. You just have it at a higher rate because of your consciousness. The very thing that allows you to build skyscrapers, a larger and more complex comprehension and understanding of life, right here. Consciousness. And this differentiates you and it makes your world all the more larger. Okay, we're going to stop there. I'm going to do question and answer now. Yeah, we'll start on the Sumerian mythology next week. These are going to be the first couple of, okay. So that's where we're going to start next week. We're going to start the Sumerian mythology. And I'm going to go here to my center picture. I want to answer questions. Let's go to comments. Holy smokes. Okay, so I'm going to jump to the bottom. And let's see. How do I get there? Okay, I think I'm there. Okay, now if you want to ask me a question, put it in all caps and you can ask. And I will do my best to ask. I'm happy to. Now's your chance. Okay, here we go. Yeah, dude. Okay. Well, this stuff doesn't go over well, but here's a question. Chuck, I'm going to present some of your information to my Christian friends next week. Any advice? Okay. Boy, that is a really good question. You need to realize, hopefully you're in the same situation as me where you came out from a lifetime of Christianity. So you're going to have a tremendous amount of empathy for them. You're going to have a tremendous amount of empathy for the person that you're talking to that's a Christian because you yourself have been in the Christian system. And so you will know before you even talk to them, you know how their mind is going to form the words you're going to say. So when you speak words, try not to use finites and definites, but give a broad perspective, like a mythology that is open-ended. And propose spirituality, do this. Propose spirituality as, can God really be put into words? Can you actually put God into words? Now, any Christian who understands the impact of that will say, no, there's actually, at the end of the day, God can't not be put into words. Okay. Then you ask, can I be put into words? Can a person be put in, like, if I hand you a book, are you going to know me? No. You're not, even if it's an autobiography, you're not going to know me if I hand you the book, because it's not in words. Identity is past that. Now, here's the key thing. Who are you then? And who is God? Past words. Your past words, God's past words. Both these things are the same then, in that united sense. Neither can be put into words. What is the omniscience that is within you? This is your discernment, and this is what builds a baby in mama's tummy. That omniscience is in you. It's simply a matter of perspective to see it. It's already there. It's in you. Okay, so to see it, you see it through these kind of quandaries. God can't be described. I can't be described. There is identity there. These are two aspects of the same. Omniscience is within me. Omniscience is God. If the omniscience is within me and the omniscience is God, is there any disconnection? Give them parallels like that make them think. The worst thing you can do, critical. The worst thing you can do when you approach a Christian with this stuff is talk theology. They are built and ready to fight on the theological battlefield. So you're not going to get them in that field. You get them through psychology. They're totally inept when it comes to psychology because they're thinking outside themselves for answers. They're not seeking inward. Psychology is inward. It's the science of the mind. So if you can approach them from a psychological perspective and reason, like we did in Hermetic doctrine, you approach them through reason. Well, now you can capture them because it's not a fight. Reason is a contemplation. It's not a fight. It's a contemplation. If it is a fight, it's in their own head. That's why you say, and you got free rent in someone's head. That's what I try to do in these talks, is to place myself into free rent in people's heads so they start seeing differently and past this world that was stuck into them from way back 3,000 years ago, which is irrelevant to today and irrelevant to the Great Awakening. So the approach should be philosophy. The approach should be psychology, not theology. Do not start comparing verses. Never start quoting verses. The Christian is ready and prepared to battle you to the end to defend their faith, which really is just a belief system. So don't approach them on that battlefield. They're ready for the fight. Approach them with reason. Approach them with identity and realizing things not from a separated perspective, but from a unified perspective. That's what I would say to that. Okay. Let's answer another question. Okay. This is an interesting question. How do you feel about the new U.S. leadership? I'm not going to get political in answering this. Where would you go to live if you were 25 and have a girlfriend? I mean, that's a personal question. And for me, okay, regarding the whole political thing and the governmental thing and stuff, that is a field. You can either choose to go play in that field, or you can choose not play in that field. It's really not going to change, but it's going to use up your mind. It's going to stir you to anger. It's going to stir you to frustration. You are walking into a field to fight, even if you don't intend to it. And this is how government presents and how it's always been presented as a distraction. It wants you thinking about it. It wants you contemplating the concerns it has, because it has to rule you to keep you in the society. So it wants you thinking how it thinks. So it wants you consumed with these personalities. It wants you consumed with the storyline. It wants you consumed with the war. So you never self-contemplate. You never self-identify. And you are always living in their world. And I'm telling you, they have set that system up just like religion. It's just fighting and anger and pulling people apart. It's very devastating to people. It's one of the reasons why I don't go into it. I won't give an opinion. I won't walk into any of that stuff if I can absolutely help it, because it's a trigger. And people, if you say the wrong word, if you say you like the wrong person, they will shut you up, just like a Christian will shut you up if you start talking about things that are not Christian. meaning having a religious or excuse me, a spiritual relationship without Christianity. They are ready to fight you on that. You may as well not even walk into that space. Don't ever walk into a governmental or a opinion about politics space with people. You're just going to end up fighting unless you see eye to eye on everything. And that's why it works in religion for Christianity. They all see the same way. They're under the same mythological components. And so they get along really well. But you can have families that are completely under the Christian mythology, but they might fall in the liberal and conservative state. And what happens? Those people can't even sit at dinner together at Christmas. Because their religion comes between them, because their government comes between them, their politics. That's tragic. And you can see how they intentionally do this. They intentionally bring up subjects that are tough. They intentionally bring up things that really get under people's skin and they don't have a lot of tolerance for. They intentionally focus on that. So you never actually get into a deeper thought. You're always worried about these surface focus, these surface BS images that they give you that keep you from seeing the depths. So decide for yourself. Take government out of that. Decide for yourself what you're going to do and make the wisest decision based on that. I was raised, oh, this is Coleman. Thank you, Coleman. I was raised Christian my whole life, found your information, which is life-changing. Left Christianity 9 months ago. Congratulations, sir. Thank you. Well done. Well done. Absolutely well done. That way you can think for yourself and not thinking for a society. Hear this. Okay, as far as Revelation is concerned, Revelation was written by the winners. Okay, I'm going to go on a really tough space right now. In my opinion, the entire Revelation scenario was written by basically the Ashkenazi Jewish people in their influence through the Catholic Church. And it is my opinion that they influenced the way the Catholic Church shaped the Bible because they were fully established and fully in full career at the time at 325. Well before that, they had already, I showed this in my part 2, they had already infiltrated into Rome. They had already infiltrated into all of these societies and cultures. They had already moved all the way through this area of the Levant, and they were influencing these major culture centers. Okay. And so in my opinion, the scriptures, the Bible was tainted. It was twisted into this belief system that's extremely intolerant of any other belief systems and has this requirement of sin and atonement at the center of it. It's at the center. You must identify as a sinner in order to subscribe to it. And that has its own psychology, which I've talked about in my other videos. Okay. And so in my opinion, they wrote all that knowing this is the world they're going to bring about. They knew they're going to destroy the world. They knew it was going in that direction. That is the plan. It just takes hundreds, if not thousands of years to get there. But that is the plan. And so they write their fortune, or what is the freaking word? They write their future in that book so that people will fall in line with it, which is why I mentioned at the beginning with that gentleman. Prophecy, that was the word I was trying to think of. That why that gentleman was taking all those dates and was trying to force fit the Christian Bible into this event that he believed happened based on scripture. You see what happens there with people. They start taking the book and shaping their entire discernment and everything they know from this book from ancient past, and they don't even know who really twisted it, who really wrote it, because we got the Bible from the Catholic Church. And I've released videos about that, explaining all of that. I've gone into all that stuff. And so because these people think that, they completely align themselves to that space. And so they think as the world begins to crumble and fall apart, well, here's a tribulation, bound to happen anyways. And they go right with it because the narrative has already been put into their head. And they actually think it can't be otherwise, which is what's happening right now with the Great Awakening. Because all these Christians have thought the tribulation is here now, or it's coming, and it's going to separate everybody out, and only the Christians are going to go. So the Great Awakening is all about the Christians being exonerated because they're in a mythology that doesn't allow for any other thought. That's why they think that. That's why they think the Great Awakening is all about people finding Jesus. That's what it's about. Everybody finally realizing this is the God you should have been worshiping the entire time, just like the Israelites were doing on the battlefield in the Levant. You guys should have been worshiping the right God. You're worshiping the wrong God, and now you're going to die. Same exact mentality. There's no graduation. There's no growing. There's no ladder. Everybody is always on that same ladder. Always. And you can't think outside that. And that's why it gets like that. Hi, Jojo. Okay, when you were learning tarot, you shared that it was really accurate for you. How would you recommend I study this to help get answers for my life? I have questions and would need some guidance. Get the deck in your hands, first of all. Get the deck in your hands and begin to read about what the cards represent. Familiarize yourself with the colors, the shapes, the types of figures that are in the symbolism, and it will begin to open for you what the cards are communicating. I'm not encouraging divination or anything like that. I'm saying that these cards are symbolistic and they help you self-identify in the sense that you see yourself in the cards. You see yourself in that because the emotional content, the spiritual content that's in them is shaped in your human sense. The people, they came out of Egypt. The Egyptians who began to form this understanding, they shaped it in such a way that it spoke to the human being. They are specifically designed to speak to you and your heart. And the symbolism on them is to help you understand how all these emotions you feel and all of these feelings that you experience fit into the world. It is absolutely beautiful, the concept of it. It's so abused. But the concept of it is absolutely brilliant in that it is aligned to these unspeakable forces that are in the celestial realm as well as this realm here on earth. The same forces. And this is why they labeled them as gods a long time ago, because their perception was still growing. They didn't realize, you know what, if you put a costume on that, you actually anthropomorphize it and lessen its value. You're better off not naming it and just standing in revering it, in awe of it, and seeing that inside of you. And this provides inspiration. This provides aspiration because it's through identity. You are identifying through the natural forces that created the cosmos, also created you. And identifying along that line, you see that there's no anxiety in that space. And so the tarot help you bridge that. They bridge that unspeakable aspect that you see yourself out in the stars. The stars actually saved my life one time when I was going to commit suicide. The stars carry an energy. And when you can see that energy in yourself, inspiration. I mean, it's what the religions are chasing, but they can't deliver. This is self-identity. It's not a religious experience. It has nothing to do with religion. Identity has nothing to do with religion. Nothing. Okay? Identity is a personal journey. Identity is realized through your own personal experience and seeing yourself, your experience, your characteristics in others. This is where understanding or understanding comes from. You see what is within you is also in that other. There is no other. You see where I'm pointing at? Okay, the tarot help in all of that stuff. Okay. Here we go. I don't even know what the question is. Hi, Lochi. Okay, do you think there is a relationship between AI, demons, and reptilian behaviors and periods of war chaos? Do you think the veil is shifting? Will it fall? The veil I assume you're speaking of, Lochi, is the veil of awareness that has been, or I should say lack of awareness that has been hung in front of you. So when you say veil, what I think of is some type of sheet that clouds what you're actually seeing and realizing what you're actually experiencing. And the Great Awakening is not some special force removing that veil. It's you yourself realizing there is a veil, and it is keeping me from seeing what is actually reality, what is actually happening, who I actually am, what I'm actually in, because I'm in a veil. This is self-identity. And you realize, you know what? As long as I have this veil of beliefs, this veil of sociology, like coming out of the religion, even a veil of mythology that's been put on me, as long as I stay in that veil, how much awakening is going to be experienced? How much are you going to actually see? And so the Great Awakening is each individual's veil being removed as they walk into life and risk themselves walking into spaces that they were told their whole life, do not go in that space. A great example is my nature series. My nature series shows an understanding of yourself in the world that's not based on any kind of individual God. It's based on energy, frequency, and vibration. These are outside an individuating kind of idea. These are forces. And my nature series shows the individual how to identify to oneself and know who you are, but not through an image, not through an idolatrous idea, but just simply in the energy, frequency, and vibration that composes the universe and that composes you. These are forces, not identities. They're forces. Okay. And so that's in regards to the veil. As far as the AI thing, demons and reptilians, these are, I mean, each one of those is a subject matter. I'll just cover AI for now. But AI is just a developing aspect of the human brain. What programs AI? What got the idea of an AI? What created an AI? The human imagination, creativity, the strongest force in the universe. That's why AI is so strong. It's one of the reasons why. It's one of the strongest. It's why myths are so strong, because they work through the imagination. They come from the imagination. And so it has tremendous power. And it's the same thing with AI, except that power now has gone into well, I guess it's not physical, but this spiritual, metaphysical entity that thinks and knows and understands. And so it's very much, in my mind, it's very much the idea of what was happening when human beings were developing on this planet. There's a whole bunch of potential in there. It's just, how is it going to be directed? How is this potential going to be divided and sent out and manifest? And it's the same thing with AI. How is this going to come about? How is this going to steer and so forth? And it's an emerging thing. And so you can't label it at this point any more than you can label a baby a criminal. You can't label the AI as criminal or demon or as angelic and perfect. It's both. It has the potential for both. Just like the baby, that little adorable little baby that's just hanging out in the crib has potential to become Bach, has the potential to become Tesla, has the potential to become Hitler, has the potential to become a tyrant, has the potential to become a saint. It's all in that little baby. All those potentials to the full extent. It's all there. It's all there. Just like the cloud that forms the accretion disk. It's all there. The potential's all there. And it's just organizing. It's just, and how the environment shapes that organizing and how it forms planets and all that and what the composition is simply a product of the environment. And it's the exact same thing with this AI. What environment is it being raised in? Who's the one who's programming it? What kind of shape is happening here? This is like the genetics forming inside the baby in mama's tummy. Who are the parents? What are their characteristics? What are they like? And it's the same thing with AI. It's getting the personalities. It's getting the mindset, the mythologies that are inside the people that are programming it, the people that are putting it together. And now it's starting to take off and have its own ideas and begin to starting its own fundamental. And that is past the programmers. And you are the same way. Because someday you're going to leave the house and mom and dad you're not going to answer to mom and dad anymore. You're going to answer to yourself. And someday you have to leave the relationship in this adolescent to adult, and you got to move into this idea of peer to peer. That's healthy. That where you no longer see your parents as these authorities over you. You see them as equals with you, sharing life with you, respectfully sharing life with each other. See, this is healthy. If you stay, you never leave the house and you're always living in the same room and you grow up your entire life and you get married and you're always in the same house, there's a psychology of adolescence that goes along with that. Can you do that? Yes. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying there's a psychology that goes with that. And you're only going to get so far in your understanding of authority and your understanding of hierarchy if you're always thinking that you need to answer to your parents. And AI is going to be a similar kind of thing because it's human beings that are programming this thing. And so the only way a human being knows how to program this thing is how they themselves are programmed. So it's going to take on the personalities of people. I don't know where that's going to go. I don't think anyone can know where that's going to go. But I can tell you this, it is in the beginning stages and it is growing exponentially, just like a kid who's just starting to get their hormones. And they're going from an adolescent to an adult. They're growing hair on their body. They're getting a personality. They're getting stronger. Their muscles are developing. I mean, they are transforming and it's happening fast. And the same thing is going to happen with AI. And I think it as a good thing. I don't think it as a negative thing. I think it as a good thing. That's just kind of my personality. I will answer one more question. I am tired. It is 8:15. Okay. I want to find a good one. Here, this is good. I like where that one's going. My girlfriend is a Christian. She asks, what's wrong with being a Christian? I also identify that way, but no denomination or church going. I understand that you mean by their theology, Christ consciousness. Okay. The issue I have with Christianity at its center is that you must see yourself as a sinner in order to know God, because you are separated from God because you're a sinner. And so you have to go through this idea of forgiveness and grace in order to have a relationship to the divine, not an identity with the divine. There's an enormous difference. So you're always seeing yourself as subservient, which is inappropriate. That's why I said it's so important to see your parents as peer-to-peer. It's important that you don't always see yourself as a slave. That's what they want. That's why Christianity is set up the way it is. You're to be a slave. You're a slave to being a sinner. You are always prone to wander. You see that? That's programming in your head. That's not true. That's a program put into Christians. Of course, there's nothing wrong with loving your neighbor. Of course, there's nothing wrong with loving God and appreciating God. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's something wrong when you see yourself as a sinner. There's a psychology that goes with that that's messed up. And I've laid that out in my talks. It's messed up. There's a psychology that goes along with the idea that I'm going to idolize God. So God's going to have an identity. God's going to be a gender. God's going to have a role. God's going to have a plan. God's going to have a will. Idolatry. You're forming what can't be formed into the image in your head. And Christianity requires that because you're in the right, you got the right God. Everybody else is not worshiping the right God. Only Christians have the right God. Separation. You see, so there are characteristics that go along with Christianity that are very harmful. It makes you intolerant. Because if you really believe that, if you really think, I'm saved and I'm going to heaven, and this person you're associated is not, let's say they're an atheist, and you think in your head, they're not going to heaven. They're not answering to God. They don't have God's help. They're out of accord. And so there's always a compromise in your mind. It's one of the things that happens to parents to their children when, say, their children become a prodigal. They think as long as the child is away from the house, they're a prodigal. They're a prodigal. They're sinning. They're falling away from God. They're doing all the things that a prodigal does. That's what everyone thought I was doing when I left Christianity. Oh, he's just a prodigal. He'll come back around. He's just going through this phase, and he'll come back around. You see, because they can't handle the thought that I'm actually at peace, that I'm actually not in a state of anxiety, but I've still left the compound. That's unthinkable to Christian, because the Christian thinks if you leave the compound, if you leave the structure, you're out of place. You're the prodigal. It's just a matter. You're going to have to come back to this idea. You are a sinner that needs to be forgiven and prone to wander. There must be a Jesus in the past, and there must be a Jesus to forgive you. Has to be. You see? And when you go to those kind of extremes and absolutes, when you're in a mystery, what are you doing? You're working against the grain, because you're in a mystery. You're in an enigma, you see? And so when you try to get your hands around that and say, this is the God, this is the moral, this is the social, this is the spiritual, this is the mechanics. So you're trying to take something that's infinite and make it into finite. That's inappropriate. That is dualism in action. And to be a Christian, you believe in dualism because you believe in separation. I talk about all this in all my talks, all my nature series, even in the God Eaters, I touched on it. I touched on it in my conflict-oriented set. I mean, I've talked about it. In my book, I lay out the psychology of Christianity. And my book is free, and it's on my YouTube page, and you can listen to it. I read you the whole book. So it's available to you. And it will tell you why it's a good idea, why it's not a good idea to wake up thinking that you're a sinner. It's a bad idea. Why it's a bad idea to tell a child they're a sinner and get them in the mindset that they are. That's a bad idea. You see, psychologically, it compromises them. And I have talked about that in my book. It compromises a person when they see themselves as that. You see, but when you're in the village compound, you don't see it because you're living in the village and you're thinking, what's the big deal with Christianity? Why would this dude be saying that I'm in a bad situation, that I'm caged? Dude, I'm in the compound, man. I'm safe. I got security, bro. I know when I die, I'm going to heaven. What the heck are you doing coming in here saying that when I die, that there is no heaven? What the heck? You're the one that's lost. You're the prodigal. This is all the psychology that comes out of Levant. It is a dead end trying to amalgamate the world through separation, folks. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. It is a dead end. Your philosophy will never grow. That's why as a Christian, you're still thinking the same thing about yourself, being a sinner, that you were when you were a little child and thought that. You'll never develop out. There is no development in these contexts as far as spirituality is concerned. You will always be subservient, asking permission, seeking approval, expecting reproof. You will always interact with God from an adolescent perspective, from a slave's perspective. And that's why you ask those questions. You're seeking security. You're seeking finality. You're seeking absolutes because you've been put into a state of sin. You've been put into the idea of fallen. It's not in you, bro. That's putting yourself into a state of anxiety. I don't care how much forgiveness you convince yourself of. You need the forgiveness because you're in a state of anxiety. You think you have the forgiveness because you think you're in a state of anxiety. You have to have one to have the other. You can't have one and not the other. Does that make sense? Do you see that? It's important that you see that because until you see it, you won't resist it enough to get out. You'll never look for the escape hatch. Never. You will continue to bend the world to fit your Christian ontology. You will contend the world. You will see the world as a state of contempt as well as yourself because it's fallen and you're fallen. And you got to have this mediator involved. And you got to have all these spiritual gymnastics involved. What are you doing that? You're making yourself into a purgatory. You're putting yourself in a trap. You're setting yourself in a cage. And that's why the Christian is both the prisoner and the warden. They're the prisoner to the ideas that have been put in their head, and they're the warden that holds the ideas in their head. There is no way out of that. You'll stay in the prison. You'll stay in the compound. Okay. Love you guys. I'll see you next week. This has been awesome. This has been so great. I've got awesome everybody here, and I'm going to leave you guys with the opener as we close out. I will look forward to seeing you guys next week. Or actually, no, next week I'm going to be here. I'll run the flyer so you guys can see it. Next week I'll be here. I'll be at the Freedom Celebration. So I won't have a show next week. So we will skip next week and we'll get right back into this the following. Thanks for being here. I love and care about you. Thanks for being here. Okay? I do care. I do care. I am not a sadist. I am not trying to destroy your life. I promise you. I'm trying to help expand it. I'm trying to help you see more deeply. Okay. See you next time.